Yeah. Can you hear me, Jessica?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, just doing a check before we get started here.
Okay.
Okay. Let's call this council work session to order. Today is Wednesday, December 1st. Time is 1 p.m. Before we open it up for visitor comments, I'm going to go ahead and allow our chief to come up and speak to us.
Good afternoon, Council. Mr. Walsh, I'd just like to give an update to Council and our community at whole about a couple incidents that happened this weekend in St. Helens that a lot of people are aware of and the police department's aware of. We had a rash of car prowls / car burglaries 2 nights in a row in St. Helens. And so I'm here to speak to that, mostly to inform Council, but to ask and implore our residents of St. Helens to kind of partner with the police department on a couple crime prevention tips that will greatly reduce the chances of you becoming a victim of property crimes within St. Helens. So Saturday night, we encountered a group out of what we believe to be, and I'm very careful what I say because this is an active investigation that our detectives are currently working as I speak. A group of individuals that came from what we believe to be Portland in a stolen vehicle into our community, and they had entered into what at this time were over 50 of our vehicles in our community on the west side of Highway 30. We have home video surveillance that was provided us by some of the victims and some great community members of our suspects on camera with their faces covered. And they were trying car doors, or vehicle doors, I should say, cars and trucks, SUVs. And if the car was locked, they would leave it and go to the next car. And so they, to the tune of over 50 vehicles that were unlocked in our community just Saturday night alone, they were able to enter those vehicles and take a plethora of our property. From laptops to credit cards to loaded firearms to garage door openers, bank bags that had money in them, everything that we asked our community not to leave in the vehicle, they had taken it. We are actively working leads to apprehend those individuals and bring them to justice in our community. We've been in contact with our district attorney who's aware of this. What we've learned about that crew on Saturday night is that St. Helens is not alone. We believe that this is it could be connected to individuals who are targeting cities outside of within the Portland metro area, and then they flee back to Portland in that general area after they commit their crimes in our community. Subsequently, the next night, well, let me back up. So in addition to the items they stole, they actually stole 2 vehicles out of St. Helens and 1 out of Columbia City. One of the vehicles that was stolen out of St. Helens actually had the key fob inside the vehicle, and it was left unlocked. So the following night on the east side of Highway 30, towards the river, we had another a male and female, I would say, suspects who were in a stolen vehicle that was stolen out of Vancouver. And they did the same, not to the tune of 50, but numerous cars on the east side of Highway 30 that were left unlocked. What we know as of now is that each victim, we haven't had a victim come forward that said they broke our windows. We can confidently say that all the vehicles that were involved in this were left unlocked. There was numerous valuable items left inside of these vehicles, which kind of hampers our job of finding that property and getting it back. So I'm asking our community at whole to please do 3 simple things continuously. One is lock your vehicle at all times. We are not immune to any type of property theft in our city. We're not immune to crime in our city. We have seen, that for not to sit and argue, we are seeing an influx in our population, and along with our population growth, we do have crime. So lock your vehicles. Number 2 is take your keys. Do not leave keys or key fobs inside your vehicle. Okay, even if it's locked, please don't do that. And 3, hide your valuables. It's a simple 3-step thing. Lock, take, hide. Employ that theory in anything you do. As we approach the holiday seasons and you're shopping, lock your car, take your keys, hide your valuables. Help us keep our city of St. Helens safe. Help us reduce the crime And please, if you were a victim of a crime, please report it, because we could, it could be something that we need to know. Some people may feel embarrassed by this. Please don't. We're all in this together. We want to make St. Helens the safest community in Oregon. That's our goal, and we need to do that in concert with each other to be able to reach that goal. So I'm here for any questions. We will diligently work on this. We did recover some property, and we're starting to work on ways to get the property back to the owners that we were able to recover in our community to make sure that, but I beg of everybody in our community, just please lock your car doors. It's telling when we have over 50 victims and each vehicle was left unlocked. And so again, I'm here for answer any questions that you may have. As always, if you're a victim of crime, please call the police department. We will be there and help as best we can. But our number one goal is to prevent crime from happening. We'd much rather spend the resources in preventing it, so we don't have to come in front of council and kind of ask our community to do the right thing. So, is there any questions or anybody that can answer?
Yeah, so the crimes, just for clarification, have been vehicles only for the most part. Any crimes in household burglaries at all?
Well, there was one, and I'm glad you asked that, Councilor Morton, is that one of the vehicles that was broken into had a garage door opener inside, and the suspects actually entered the garage of that residence while what we believe to be the occupants sleeping inside, which is alarming, and it's very concerning, because they, that's crossing a threshold, in my opinion, where it's making it a little more personal. So, I can't tell people what to do. However, just be aware, it's not a bad idea to take your garage door opener into your home. And this has happened in other jurisdictions where if you're at a mall holiday shopping and they watch the family go inside, they break in, they get your registration out of your glove box, they take your garage door opener knowing that you're there, and they visit your house. So again, little crime prevention tips or actions on our residents' part go a long way. So our communications officer, Crystal King, has put out information. We will continue to regularly put out information to keep our community safe, but we need everybody to do their part to make sure that we don't want St. Helens. We do not want crime in St. Helens. Go somewhere else. And it's evident that when they were checking car doors that were locked, they simply moved on to the next car. So even as we had one of our own, own employees, police department, had his car locked, and the suspects tried the door handles. It was locked. They went on to the next car, which was unlocked. So we want to get to the point where everybody's locking their cars. They go to another city and don't come to St. Helens. We're not going to tolerate that. Our community stands together to fight crime.
Thank you for being here on immediate request, and that's very noteworthy as council.
I would just like to state that, for anybody who sees any suspicious activity, even if you see, I would not be offended if I was driving the neighborhoods and you called and had one of our officers stop me. I would be thankful that you were looking out for your neighbors.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. The old mantra, if you see something, say something. That's not just because of after 9/11 with the terrorist activity or at the airport. It's in our community. If you see something, say something. We want to know. And it's better to encounter somebody, and it's a chance for our officers and to interact with our community and let our community know that we're engaged in the community and we're out there keeping everybody safe. So, okay. Yes, sir.
How many people, 1, 2, 5, were involved in this? This seems like it's an organized operation.
Well, I can tell you that both crews, I would call them, on both Saturday night and Sunday night had more than one person. But we, because of the sensitivity and confidentiality of the investigation, we want to make sure that, but yeah, there were multiple people involved in this. We're working with other law enforcement agencies around, the Portland metro area who's also experiencing this, and we're collaborating with them, and hopefully, along with our resources and our investigation, we can put this to rest.
Chief, good work, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Council.
And just a reminder for councilors and for people coming up, when you come up, please remove your mask to share, because you are being recorded and we need to take minutes. So it's very difficult for our city recorder to do that. All right, so with that, we'll open up for visitor comments. So please keep your talks to 5 minutes or less, and please state your name for the record. Come on up. I know you, but for the record.
I'm Linda Zoll, and I live here in St. Helens. And I really appreciated Chief Pixley's comments. I know the last time we had a,
Chief Greenway.
I'm sorry, Chief Greenway.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the sheriff, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And because the last time we had a rash of break-ins, unfortunately, we didn't have that comment from our chief. And so my neighbors decided to take things into their own hands. They didn't call the police when they suspected. And they were out harassing people. And it was really, really sad to me. Because I think there was somebody who was completely innocent, just out on a stroll, and they decided to take it into their own hands. So I'm really glad that the chief said, give them a call and they'll deal with it. Okay, so, but the comment I wanted to make, or the request I wanted to make, is that the city eventually look into the issue of drones. I know the state has some drone regulations, and I never thought it would be an issue. My father-in-law used to, on our property, because we have 6 acres, used to do model airplanes. And he always flew, from our property away from any houses. He never flew over a house, and there were no cameras on it. And I've got somebody in the neighborhood who, at dusk, when we're oftentimes out in our little pool that we have, is flying a drone, and they're going across our property. And so it's like, if there weren't cameras, it wouldn't be an issue. But these things have cameras, and I just don't want my dog, them. I don't know what he's doing. And he's taking pictures of my daughter's out there in the car or what. So that's just a request for that to be addressed in sometime in the near future.
Linda. Okay, any other visitor comments?
Guess I'll leave this on. I'll pass this out. I have 2 concerns. My name is Al Peterson, for the record. I have 2 concerns. One is something that was said at your last meeting. And based on some of the faces that were on the screen when I watched the video, it appeared to me that what Mr. Topaz had pointed out was not obvious to you all. So I'm curious as to whether or not your staff has been informing you about this. And this is a summary, since Mr. Topaz mentioned it, it's public record. All one has to do is look it up. So this is a timeline of what Mr. Topaz mentioned. And I hope you all take Mr. Topaz up on getting the documents. He said he could give you a thumb drive copy of them all. I looked them all up and I made a timeline. And apparently the city's been sued and the city has lost the lawsuit. And now the city is arguing about whether or not the city should be paying Cascade Tissue's attorneys $130,000 in attorney's fees because they lost the lawsuit. Now the lawsuit's been appealed to the State Court of Appeals, but the reason I'm concerned is, my mom sued the city kind of over the same case, and the mayor likes to mention that, but my mom sued the city when the city was not following state law. So when that suit happened, what did the city do? Well, they took all of the allegations, which were basically true. They itemized all the things that they had not done. They re-notified, they had a new hearing, and they followed all the things that they had not done under state law. This lawsuit is because the city did not follow its own city law. So now, Judge Callahan, you can read her thing and you can probably get the thumb drive from Mr. Topaz and you can read the case for yourself. And basically, the city lost. The city did not follow its own laws. And I'm concerned when, the city is not following its own laws. So I think you all should, review that. And I think, based on your faces when Mr. Topaz brought it up 2 weeks ago, it appears that you guys haven't been notified. So you need to talk to your staff and see, hey, are you guys notifying me about this stuff? I know you guys have all these executive sessions and in theory, that's when you need to talk about it. You don't talk about it in the public. I understand that, but from what I saw on the camera, it did not appear to me that some of you knew about all this stuff. Second, the thing that you have in your packet is listed as changes to the personnel procedures under the ordinance. I don't remember what it's called, but I'm concerned about this. I don't watch all of your meetings, but I do watch quite a few of them, and I haven't seen a lot of discussion about all of these changes that you are making or wanting to make, and some of them are quite significant. So I hope that this hasn't just been dropped on you. I went to go through it. The problem I have with it is basically the city says, oh, we don't have to follow state law. We don't have to follow contracting procedures under state law. We're going to follow our own. This is, one, giving more authority to city staff. Two, is upping the amount of contracts that city staff can just write themselves. I'm concerned that one of the other amendments, and I don't know if you've moved it somewhere else or what, because I can't find it. You've eliminated the library director position. And there are major changes in this. And I haven't seen this in other packets in the past, so I don't know if you've been discussing it, but I'm very concerned when what appears to be, well, based on this, city staff who cannot follow state law or even the city's own law. And now apparently staff making major changes and giving themselves more authority to write larger contracts without even talking to you guys. So I'm very concerned, and I hope the heck you don't tonight just ignore what I say and just go ahead and authorize all of these changes, because I don't think, frankly, some of these changes are exceptions to state law. And in order to understand these exceptions, you have to understand what the state law
I'm gonna need
is.
you to wrap it up, okay?
So I'll wrap it up. So in order to understand all of these things, you have to understand, okay, we're making an exception to this, but what is the exception we're making? Because I don't even know what the original is. So I'm just very concerned, and I think based on, like I said before, based on your reactions on camera 2 weeks ago, I don't think your staff is informing you.
That's not exactly true. And so I'm just gonna state this for the entire council, that Mr. Peterson just dropped a bunch of different bombshells onto us. The sale of the property was not illegal. We went through the process. It's within our urban renewal. Because your mom did file a lawsuit saying we did appraise and go through the process. If we are allowed to do that. You lost, you challenged it. You have no ground there. I will state that we talk about this with our attorneys in executive session, and you're exactly right. And Mr. Topaz likes to ride that line, and what he's saying that probably should be held confident that we're supposed to keep amongst us in our executive session, Mr. Peterson. And then
I'm
furthermore,
just pointing out.
none of us have legal people in our family. You have two that are in your family, attorneys. None of us do, and we have attorneys present, and they are guiding us through this process. I appreciate your concern. Thank you very much.
You lost.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor
No, I'm gonna talk. You jumped in. No, it's my turn. This was what the court said on a new case, not the Peterson case of years ago.
We are being notified of this with our attorneys. We have been.
I have not been notified.
Where have you not been then? You've
I've been
sat
at the
in
council
You've
meetings.
been in on every executive session.
That's
Councilor,
correct.
Have you been notified? Just a yes or no?
Yes, I believe we have been informed
Yes
by
or
our
no?
attorney in executive session.
Councilor Chilton, yes or no? Just on the ACSP. You're muted. And we'll let her,
I believe.
there we go. Now you can talk.
Yes, we have been notified, and my understanding was this was a part of discussion in an executive session, which is not
Yes.
supposed to come out of executive session, which is the meaning of the shock on all of our faces when Councilor Topaz discussed it in public.
Thank you. Yes, okay.
What I am talking about is public record. This is public record.
Point of order,
You're lying. This is public record.
Point of order, you're right.
Thank you.
You can bring it up in your report. Councilor Topaz.
I will.
Point of order.
Okay. Hold it, on point of order, there's a requirement under Robert's Rules of
Point of
Order.
order, I am moving on with visitor
We're
comments.
breaking rules, thank
No,
you.
not. It's my meeting to run. Is there any other visitor comments? Not seeing any. Okay. So our next item, our first item on the agenda is discussion regarding proposed beekeeping code amendment.
Get the presentation up there. So I am the lead presenter. We do have some folk from the beekeeping community here. If some questions arise later on, since I know ordinances, I don't personally have experience with beekeeping. So we do have some of our local experts here. So beekeeping in St. Helens. On this slide, the first one thing you'll notice is there is an ordinance number referenced. This ordinance is on tonight for first reading, and we're not being assumptive of your acceptance of it. We're simply trying to be efficient. If you accept it, it can be approved. If you have some concerns, we can always delay it further. So, but it is on tonight in the event that all is swell with you. You did that? Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's talk about some of the context of why we're talking about this. Back in 2015, state of Oregon passed a bill that did a couple things. It prompted the League of Oregon Cities to adopt a model ordinance and for the OSU Extension Service to adopt some best practices for honey beekeeping. And it stated that local government should review its ordinances and determine whether or not they want to do something different. It doesn't mandate us to make changes, but it helps prompt or facilitate the change if so desired. If we look at our own rules currently, and I think for probably several decades, beekeeping is prohibited within city limits. If you recall, at your August 4th work session, we introduced the concept of considering honey beekeeping rules, and the council was open to the idea. You had some, well, think about this, think about that, and we put that into some of the considerations here. So that's kind of the framework of where we're at, not yet. So some of my own thoughts on the matter is if we look at certain phenomenon occurring globally in our region, there's a lot of holy bleep phenomena, such as the fire event we witnessed 2 summers ago, the flooding happening to our neighbors to the north of us. And those are very evident. They get a lot of news and a lot of attention. And another holy bleep factor that is not as evident is the decline of bee species, including honeybees. So honeybees, wild and domestic, perform about 80% of all pollination worldwide. Bees and other pollinators, there's a variety of them, like birds, bats, butterflies, but bees are the king pollinators, play a critical role in our food system. And if you know me, I'm famous for my appetite, and that concerns me. I like food, right? So a single bee colony can pollinate 3 million flowers a day. And we're talking about fruits, nuts, and vegetables as far as our food source. Some more numbers. 70 out of 100 of the top human food crops, which supply 90% of the world's nutrition, are pollinated by bees. So a very considerable number. And a bee can pollinate a flower or plant up to 2 miles away from its home base. Let's talk about numbers a little bit. The total annual value of US honeybee products and services sold is approximately 700 million. Of course, money talks. So let's talk about the holy bleep factor in numbers. So some of that holy bleepness began in 2006 when experts noticed a significant yearly decline in honeybee colonies. And if we just look at the last year, between April of 2020 and 2021, beekeepers across the United States saw a loss of roughly 45% of honeybee colonies. So that's a flip of the coin, heads or tails. Is this colony going to survive or not? So those numbers are kind of concerning. And considering a government's prime role is public health, safety, and welfare. And food, nutrition, those are health, safety, and welfare items. Now, you have the voting public, and we have neighbors that may be concerned about nuisances and stuff. And certainly, people like that need to be listened to. Those are part of the community as well. And so, given all that, the goal of these rules is to allow honeybee keeping, but do so efficiently from a government or a governance standpoint, and then also with the consideration of others, basically trying to prevent nuisances. So, next slide, please. Let's talk about what we're proposing for the city. Now, one of the things that we put in there is the exceptions for the prohibition on beekeeping, allowing mason bees. A lot of people use mason bees, and usually they're not in big numbers, and you can see an example of a mason bee there in the upper right-hand corner of the slide. And then allow honeybee keeping with certain parameters. One of the things that we discussed internally was whether or not we would require any kind of permitting or animal facility license. And the idea was we wouldn't require any kind of license or permit. And the idea is that the parameters to allow honeybee keeping should be easy to understand when there's a problem. For example, if the hives are visible, one of the rules is that they be shielded. And flight patterns are low, for example, at the property line, they're below 6 feet, which could create a nuisance for people walking by a property. Swarming outside of the normal season is an indication that the hives are being poorly managed. And then aggressive behavior is also a reflection of poor management. So if those things are happening, then we know there's a problem, and there would be need to get code enforcement involved just to kind of see what's going on. In this slide, you have the picture of the mason bee. There's a honeybee in the lower right-hand corner, and then a yellow jacket. We're not looking at making beekeeping or a yellow jacket keeping. I don't know if anybody actually does that, but sometimes neighbors don't get along. It wouldn't surprise me if someone wanted to try that. But we're not talking about yellow jacket keeping. And yellow jackets kind of give bees a bad rap. I've been stung by yellow jackets dozens of times, largely because of my own fault. But I definitely know the difference. So next slide, please. So let's get into the details a little bit. And one of the items, and this was a concern of the council, was some type of quantity limitation. So some can't say, well, I have 1,000 hives, what's wrong with that? And we kind of have a sliding scale based on the size of the property at hand. And I should back up and say this is honeybee keeping related to residential uses. So you have a home, you want to have honeybees in your backyard. That's what this is intended to apply to. So for any property, we're setting up to 4 hives. That's comparable to the city of Portland. When we're up to 10,000 square feet, up to 6, also the same as Portland. And then once we're above an acre, we're talking about 10 hives. And you'll see some different numbers up there from some of the cities we looked at. Portland is 6, Spokane is 8. But the one I want to kind of focus on for how we reach the 10 is the city of Ashland. So the city of Ashland maxes out at 5, but they also allow 1 nuke. Or I don't know if it's nuke or nuke. It's nuke. Okay, thank you. It's not my thing. So the city of Ashland doesn't distinguish between a nuke or an adult colony. And what the nuke is, it's a nucleus colony. It's a smaller grouping of bees with a queen that's intended to facilitate a new colony. And that's important for maintenance. You have to requeen a hive is one of the things for maintenance. And so having the nucleus colony is important. And some of the stuff I've read, you know, you may want to have a nucleus colony for each adult colony. And I talked about the rules being efficient. If there is an issue, you know, we want to be able to go out and, well, how many boxes are there? The city of Ashland has some rules that says, well, okay, you can have so many hives, but then you can have so many nucleus colonies, but there have to be a smaller dimension. And that it should be a quick, okay, how many units do you see? It should be a quick, efficient thing. So that's how we reach the 10. So it's including both the adult and nucleus colonies. I should also mention that there are no studies that link a precise number of hives to the probability of a nuisance, according to the science and studies that are out there. Next slide, please.
How many parking spots per box?
Well, as long as they're not tandem. Okay, so some of the rules that we have to prevent a nuisance. So the 2 on this slide I want to talk about are keeping it hidden from public view at all times. That's pretty simple. And then flight path management. This is a really important one. And a bee, once it reaches about 10 feet in elevation, they'll scatter. So you don't have that concentration. And the whole objective of managing flight path is to make sure that when a bee reaches the property line, it is at or above 6 feet in height. You know, that way it's kind of above people, doesn't create a problem. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. You can have the hive elevated above 10 feet, for example, on the top of the building that you see there. You can have a hive set back from a property line 10 feet. That gives them enough trajectory to get to that point, to get to that height. Or if you can't achieve that kind of setback, you can have something as demonstrated in the lower right-hand corner and the upper right-hand, where you have some type of fence vegetation that forces the bee to that elevation. So then they're at the property line, and then they just keep going up and scattering, thus not messing with anybody. So that's something that is in there. It should be very easy to see. If we have a problem with someone inspects it and go, okay, well, you know, it's just height and distances. Next slide, please. Couple other things, some additional setback requirements. The hive shouldn't be closer than 3 feet to a property line, and that's consistent with our structure codes. You know, no structure, regardless of a setback requirement, should be closer than 3 feet. And then also an additional insurance that when you have a public property or public way, like a sidewalk, that there is a 15-foot setback from the hive from that. Also, you'll see highlighted is water source availability. There's certain times of the year where bees forage more often. And as part of that, they want water to help thin out the honey, do what they do. And the idea of having a water source on the property is that the bees stay on the property for that water rather than going to the neighbor's pool and getting the neighbors excited. So setback requirements, water availability is another parameter that we've included into the ordinance. If you could go to the next slide, that would be fantastic. Thank you. A couple other things. We wanted to make sure that registration for the Oregon Department of Agriculture is referenced. ODA requires a license or permit, whatever they call it, when someone has 5 or more adult hives, not the nukes that we talked about. And then we put some stuff that talks about swarming mitigation and best practices, that when they're swarming, the issues that could have caused it, such as overcrowding, age of the colony, and stuff like that. Now, one thing about this picture is that that gentleman is holding a branch or something loaded with honeybees. And in the spring season, that's their natural time to swarm. And they will find a resting place, which is probably what's happening here, and be there for a few days and then move on to their main place. Now, if swarming like this is happening outside the season, then we know, well, maybe there's some management problems with the hives. Next slide, please. So again, we're not talking about yellow jackets. A lot of people like to generalize bees, and they just, not everybody's into bees or insects. And so they generalize, and these dang yellow jackets kind of give all the other bees a bad rap. And so I wanted to have some good illustrations of the yellow jackets versus the honeybees. And, yellow jackets are hairless. Honeybees have the hairs. Yellow jackets don't accumulate pollen like honeybees do. So that's just a good thing for people to be aware of. Of course, the honeybees don't make the paper nests either. And just one more slide, just for some more comparisons. We do have a lot of bumblebees in this county as well, which aren't aggressive like wasps. Just to give an example, we're focusing on honeybees, and as mentioned earlier, mason bees as well. So I am available to answer any questions. We have some of our local bee folks here as well to answer any questions that just based on my limited experience with this, I might not be able to answer. Questions?
You mentioned that honeybees have a range of 2 miles. Honeybee arrives at my flowers out in my yard. Can I tell whether that bee is from the hive across the street or from 2 miles away?
No, you can't. And I unless you attach a micro tracking device, I don't know how you would.
So I could complain about a honeybee, but I don't really know where it comes from.
Yeah, whether it's someone's bee box, a tree, a hole in a tree from McCormick Park. Yeah, there would be no way to know.
I have no concerns. I've weeded right around boxes that were full of bees that never had an issue with honeybees. So, and I figured I would because I'm feeding grass, so.
I concur with the mayor. I have absolutely, we had honeybees on my property, just adjacent to this city limits. And absolutely no problems that ever since I've been on council, I've never heard any complaints like we hear about some of the animals, barking dogs, that kind of thing. So I applaud what the staff has done.
Just remember, Kathy looked over at me because I forgot to lower your mask when you talk. So she.
And I'm sorry, yeah. You are not going to have to repeat that, I hope. Okay, thank you.
I'm known to wear a bee hat in my classroom. And
Yes.
I'm known to wear a bee hat in my classroom. And so do I have no morals based on what I heard, and in my yard, there are honeybees or bumble. I know there are there's bees, and I'm walking among them in the spring, the summer when they're not interested in me. So I think, yes, we've got the conditions for limiting the numbers, but and making sure that the owners are keeping good care, as long as they're keeping good care of the hives and the nukes. I have no concerns.
And I don't know if you would like to hear from them. They wouldn't have discussed on visitor topics because this was kind of the topic, since they did show up at my request. Well, I mean, probably yours, because you wanted to make sure the local people were involved. I wanted to make sure I had backup on any issues that I just was unaware of.
No, it makes, your presentation was spot on. It showed clear, a little bit of setback, enough for the bees to be out of the way of any walkways for citizens. Obviously, they're doing it. I think you did a good job.
Great, thank you.
You guys agree?
I think the only thing I would add, first of all, it's an awesome presentation, is that the support is there for the city because we do have a club. So, for the not animal control, the nuisance, what is her?
Enforcement officer?
Yeah, code enforcement officer. That there's some support there that you're welcome to call upon the club. Also during swarming season, if people find a swarm,
Gotcha.
the club is available. And we expect.
Asset, if they move in somewhere, you guys will come out and.
When they,
Gotcha.
yeah, and the last is that the extension office is there, and then they usually call the club. So the public, when there's somebody who is very concerned because they do have allergies, how do they bee-proof their yard? And that it is possible, because a bee only comes down to get water or to get nectar or pollen. So, there are wonderful flowers that people can plant, and they can have a flower-filled yard, and bees are never going to touch down. And so I think many times when people are afraid, they don't even know that they can do that.
Thank you, Linda. I didn't know that as well, so. All right, Jacob, so we're gonna go on to our next item, which is water district.
Yeah, so the reason we put,
Sorry.
the reason we put this on the agenda was because we've had a lot of annexations lately. And a lot of those annexations have been within the McNulty Water District area. And there's been a lot of council changeover since we worked out what we called an urban services agreement with McNulty Water District. And so we just wanted to educate the council on this. The only person who was here when we did that was Council President Morton, who probably remembers it because you were involved directly in that effort several years
Yeah,
ago.
that's quite an effort, and it was mandated by the state.
Yes.
And the county then mandated the whole issue of getting the city representatives from the city and the county together to hammer it out, and that's how it happened.
So there's a state statute, ORS 195065, that says local governments with districts with a population more than 2,500 have to form these agreements with providers, and the county is the facilitator. I actually dealt with this a little bit in my first job with Klamath County, and I saw it here again too. So for St. Helens, it means the McNulty PUD. There's 2 maps as part of the packet that I'd like to just point out real fast. And the purpose of this agenda item is just for awareness for the council, just so you're aware of it. We don't need any action from you, but it's good that you know what's going on. So there are 2 water districts within our urban growth boundary. This is on the very southern end of our urban growth boundary. We have a small handful of properties that are actually within the Warren Water District. And if we were to expand our urban growth boundary and more of our water infrastructure was in this area, we probably have to have an agreement with Warren, but that's probably years away. Just be aware, we have a little bit of Warren Water District in our urban growth boundary. And if we look at, this is a much bigger, map. Now, where that was, the previous map, where that was, just to give you context, was down here, those few properties. Now, on this map, we definitely have a lot of interaction with McNulty. The McNulty district, you can kind of see with this blue polka dot pattern. And so this urban service agreement is basically a guide to help us make decisions. Whenever we're faced with something, okay, what does our local law says? What does the state law say? And do we have any agreement? So it's part of this decision-making soup. And for McNulty, it's kind of divided by areas and use. For example, there's a little bit of McNulty east of the highway, and the agreement says, okay, well, those, when city water is available and upon annexation, those are our customers. So that makes it very clear there. For commercial and industrial properties west of the highway, same thing. When water is available and upon annexation, they become our customers. North of Pittsburgh Road and Battle Mountain Road, and that's just this little area. Battle Mountain is right here. So this little area here, that's within the district, that's exclusively McNulty. And then there's everything else, which is residential. And generally that's triggered by a city density. And if someone connects to city water, they can elect to go with city water, but they're not mandated. So that's pretty much it. One classic example that we talked about, because there's also need. And usually when we're talking about need, we're talking about necessary fire flow requirements. And the classic example that we usually give is Les Schwab. Several years ago, Les Schwab had a fire. And what do tires like to do? Well, once they're ignited, they like to burn. So there's a lot of fuel in a tire establishment like that. And when they had the fire several years ago, the fire department had a problem because the McNulty Water District didn't have much pressure for them. And so they ended up having to connect to a hydrant, I think all the way to Gable Road. It was, and this is a story from a long time ago, but it was a pretty insane distance, what they discussed. And our water line wasn't even close to Les Schwab. And so per this agreement, was it really available? Probably not. But because of the need, McNulty wasn't going to meet the fire flow requirements they needed to build that facility. So they worked with the city and actually extended that water line under the railroad tracks of the highway from McNulty Way because of the need. So sometimes need drives it. Anyways, I hope that just gives you a little bit more stuff within the city when we're dealing with water districts. And as we annex these properties, especially the commercial and industrial ones, we have to think about it a little more carefully.
Yeah, because it seems to come up every time that we're in discussion on this, and that's, you're right, is what we just have.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
It looks, Jacob, it looks like Les month or so, there's been two water lines punched under Route 30 south of Bennett Road. Is that an enlargement of the McNulty water system?
South of Bennett Road, I would assume so, because we don't have water infrastructure that far south. So it's too far. I want to look at a map to make sure it's not Warren. Could be Warren. Bennett is south of our urban growth boundary,
It's
so
about 150 yards south of Bennett Road was the first punch, and the next one's about a half a mile further on. I didn't know whether that had to do with the Bennett Road ODOT mess or not.
that I don't know, because it's outside the urban growth boundary, so we're kind of ignorant on the Bennett Road project.
But there were two lines punched underneath.
I would guess, just based on the geographic area, it's Warren, but I don't know for sure.
Question, means how competitors brought that up. On the intersection, they've already done all the work, but did we have a sleeve punched for us for water there? Large? And if not, why wasn't our engineer requesting that? And then kind of, you've been the engineer, both, but maybe the engineer, right? Wouldn't it be?
I don't think that is an issue that ever came up.
Yeah.
We did want to get some infrastructure for a future directional sign. And we try to work with them to get on that. I don't know how far we got.
Because we have water right behind Beeks, correct? But we don't have sewer.
We have sewer,
We have sewer, not water.
not water. Yeah, the most southerly water line in that area is
Comfort?
the First Street on the south side of West Schwab, that little street that goes up there. That would be the most southerly one.
Just a question, just a question. Good luck from Kathy. All right, any other questions for Jacob?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so now discussion on the 7th Street container lofts, families and amendments.
I mentioned this in my last admin report. This is kind of a cleanup issue with the 7th Street container home project. Effectively, what it does is complete some of the milestones of the main contract about substantial completion. It talks about mostly about the parking lot, and there's an agreement that the contractor is going to build the parking lot and have some public spaces, saying rather than having the property owned and park private, make it all private, and they'll just have a condition that the 9 spaces are open for public use. And that is about as short as I could say that. So,
Which in our discussion allowed them the ability to police it better than, because we have issues with our own personal parking lot, where we can even get people towed. That should be towed.
probably
Yes.
the underscoring point right there.
Yes.
The only problem is the public doesn't know they can use it.
It'll be posted, signed. Simply there's signs in here that show it. Lots of additional language into that.
All right, any other questions? Any? If you want to talk this wave or whatever, you got it. You got it right there.
Unmute myself. I just don't have any questions or anything, so.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to our next item, John.
That is on your agenda for tonight.
Okay, discussion regarding court relief services. Matt.
There is a contract for you to approve on tonight's agenda for Marine Patrol Services, which is a third-party company that offers bailiff services. This is something that we've been looking at our municipal court for the last couple of years. We actually did try and post a position, hoping like a retired cop would come and fill that position. We interviewed a couple people, nothing ever worked out though. And so we continue to have our patrol officers and sergeants come and do that bailiff services for our municipal court. We finally got in touch with this company that our judge has used at her other courts, especially at Oregon City and a number of other cities that she works at. So she's already familiar with the company. They are more than happy to come out and expand their services. They're starting to expand towards the coast more and getting into Astoria. A lot of cities are going this way. So this helps out our police department by not taking an officer off the road and putting them in the courtroom. Oftentimes that officer that is in the courtroom is on overtime because we've made a promise to our judge to have security there. So this comes at a decent savings for the city as well to have this and continue that service. And like I said, it's already a service that our judge is familiar with and people that she's worked with at other cities. So this is on for tonight's council, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just gotta protect our courts. We understand that. People don't like that system sometimes and are very irate when they come in there, so.
No, I don't, I think you answered the question. I was wanting to know how upon this group, and glad to hear the judge's experience with it. I had done some, went to the company website and checked out things, and then I did something I don't usually do when I checked out reviews on reviews on the internet, and it's like and that is like, wow, what's going on here? And it's like, okay, it's the reviews on the internet. So anyway, and some of the reviews weren't painting the company in the best light, so it's like, okay, let's set this aside and hear from our, got to hear from our staff, and I appreciate.
Highly recommended.
Yes.
In the court service.
Yeah.
They do come fully uniformed.
Yeah.
They are armed. This company also offers additional services that are quoted in here as far as like security if we need for events and those kind of things. This is a contractor that we could use if we needed to for future events.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that reviews weren't about the service that was provided. It was more employee related things anyway. But it was actually a very informative website where it does address those questions. The differences between what they do, what's a police officer, why do they dress like police officers, why do their vehicles look like. So so there is good information on their website.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to know, Matt, what are the numbers going to look like for this? When would we be budgeting for this? When would we be starting it? And would this come out of like the current money allocated for police officers? Would this come out of a separate fund?
This will come directly out of the court department budgets. As of right now, the police department has paid that overtime for servicing the court department. So that will actually be, like I mentioned earlier, a savings for the police department in the long run. We have enough money in professional services that I have budgeted for this to take effect, and we can start likely in January once the contract is signed. That 6 months for the fiscal year, I should have enough wiggle room in the professional services budget to pay for this service. And then it will continue on into the next fiscal years.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, so I see Mohammed's here probably waiting on Jacob, but we're gonna do a review a proposed bench donation on South First Street sidewalk in front of the Jordan Center. Because I see Mohammed and Jacob out there actually walking from that and taking a first-hand look on it. So, Mr. Would you like to go ahead and start?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, city council members, good afternoon. Yeah, so this was a bench that was proposed by Mr. Shane from the CCMH organization to put a bench in memorial of Mr. Pete Snell, who helped build that particular organization. So I've done a review of the application and I've conditionally approved it with some minor conditions of update of the application. The proposed bench is a middle type of bench, and I'm recommending to put a wooden one, just for the metal one, simply because it's gonna serve in consistency with what we are working on, establishing a furniture kind of standard for the city. We don't want to have any different discrepancies across the city as we move forward. And also the second recommendation I made is not to bolt the bench to the concrete, rather than just put it in front of the store, simply because there is a lot of concerns with that when it comes to safety risks, maintenance, upkeep, and potentially the major projects we're working on for the south waterfront and the First Street utility. So this is a sidewalk, and we typically don't put permanent fixtures on it. This will give the flexibility, hopefully, as we move forward. If we need to make any changes, we are able to be flexible rather than destroy the concrete, build the concrete, and all the costs associated with it. So, yeah, and I tried actually to work out of my way and see if the city had any benches to donate for this particular cause. Unfortunately, we couldn't find anything in there. So the organization still have to get one, and this might be a little cheaper when it's wooden versus
So if I can
You lower your mask, because Kathy.
lower my mask, please. If I can add to this. One of the things we're working with the Riverwalk and the First Street and Strand Street improvement projects are street furniture. This objective to kind of blend the old with the new, have kind of a seamless things. And low hanging fruit for doing that is things like lighting, landscaping, street furniture, things of that. You're not going to have all new concrete on the portions of First Street right away. And to come up with a city standard through that process is going to be really valuable. So we're not buying one of these and one of those of different colors and different patterns. And some cities, I've actually been noticed to them, have a standard bench that has the proper materials. Our ordinance here and our resolution rather here talks about them, benches shall be made of wood or concrete flat, and get some exceptions, and the approval process that goes through the Arts Cultural and Arts Commission. And it's a city property, could be right away, could be a park, could be some of their art installation on property, I suppose. So to be very mindful of these kinds of installations, not making permanent decisions, are just going to make it harder in the future to achieve that goal. And ideally, we'd have it now. We could say, here's our bench there, but we don't have that plan yet. We're working on it right now, but a little bit ahead. So I agree, not bolting it down is a very good idea.
I certainly like the idea of a policy, and it seems to me like we hammered at least 10 years ago, policy out for benches in parks, and what kind of guidelines can we use, and who's going to maintain them, and what happens if they are wood and they rot and they become dangerous to anyone who, either kids who are playing on them or people that want to take a rest and utilize them what they were designed for. So with that, we talked a lot about maintenance and what kind of maintenance issues and who's going to maintain it. Well, if they're in a park, the Parks Department maintains it. And I would imagine now Public Works, if they're on sidewalks, will maintain them. The question is that I have is for how long, and that's briefly been just talked about just a bit, that if they are burdensome, they can be taken down. And that's a problem if they're dedicated to an individual. If the bench is dedicated, their name is on it, which is an issue that we have had in Columbia View Park. And it was handled, I think it was handled pretty well with parks. This was, again, quite a few years ago. It gets sticky if somebody puts a bench in a park and memorialize it as a dedicated to a certain person, and that starts to fade away. What kind of agreement is set forth with the people who went to place that bench, who have paid for that bench, and are asking to put it in a certain place, what kind of agreement is there for the responsibility of either taking it down or maintaining it? And for how long? Is it there for 50 years? Is it there? What's the agreement? So I think that those are the questions I asked when the Parks Department was dealing with the issues. So was another thing with the parks in terms of maintaining benches is that they would put a concrete slab down, put the bench on it so that the lawnmowers could come up and kind of, you wouldn't have to move the bench every time the grass was mowed or whatever. And so there were those issues that the maintenance of the Parks Department had in terms of where they were placed and how they were placed. So it gets kind of sophisticated in a sense of what our policy will be, and I guess maybe it needs to be more defined for some people. And I would encourage staff to go forward on that if there are any loose threads on maintenance agreements, placement, and memorializing individuals, and how we do that.
Absolutely. Council President, you make very valid point about defining the terms, especially of the maintenance and, in the right of way, different set of rules sometimes play a role versus the parks, right? Bolting a bench versus it's loose, just available on the property. So very great suggestions. I know for this particular request, they requested to put it there for a long term. And the city obviously would like to accommodate and work with our citizens to provide as much as we can. And I did approve that to be basically indefinitely available, with the make that at some point, if the need arises for construction, for design, for upgrades to the sidewalk, we reserve the right to make changes.
I have a question, basically about all benches as sleeping places. We know in downtown Portland with the convenient sleeping places that we collected undesirables, and a lot of places have been turned unable to sleep at by replacing the boulders and so on. Will the size of this bench, the benches we put up in the city, collect a group of night sleepers who are just wandering through? What are
Councilor,
regulations do we have in that?
we've already thought of that. We passed an ordinance of no sleeping in our city on public property and in parks and in cars. So there is an ordinance against that.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
Yeah.
Because as I say, it's becoming obvious in places, things like this collect. The other thing that other cities have found, if you place two benches, you don't place them side by side in tandem, you kind of arrange them so people on bench one can talk to people on bench two. Basically, or
Triangular.
Artistics of communication as compared to regimentation. But good, so we do have a way of controlling.
No camping came about with the problems in McCormick Park with needles and those kinds of things. And so we passed a no camping ordinance specific for that park. And at that time, the police chief, Terry Moss, got on board and says, hey, why don't we do this citywide? And we looked at individuals camping on sidewalks or streets and in cars. We covered it with a no camping ordinance on public property. And that's why you see maybe some of the homeless on the port property, but you don't see them on city property.
Well, I know that some laws are changing, so that being said, that we have an actual ordinance, we're gonna probably have to look at that eventually, because it is required of cities to have an area for such being at the state level. So now that I'm aware that we do have an actual code, 'cause I just figured we just didn't have an issue here. It's something that we're probably gonna have to look into. So, because it's mandated by state. So-
Yeah, to have an alternative where individuals can go.
Yeah,
Right.
yep, so,
But that doesn't change the ordinance of no camping on the streets or in the
Yes.
parks or whatever.
yeah, so, but on the bench itself, I think the wood, everybody agrees, I hear your Jacob's assessment, so.
Yeah, we went and investigated the sites and this, yeah.
We could get to a point where
Where they could change.
where we have a street furniture plan for the riverfront district that kind of supersedes this resolution. And if somebody wants a bench, it's designated to be here, it's gonna look like this, and it's gonna align and look nice, and it's not gonna be a hodgepodge of different things.
And that'll probably be more of a closer cost too, and this is what it's gonna look,
Absolutely.
placards all the same, make sure they match, Yeah, yep, I like it. Okay, thank you, Mohammed.
You're welcome.
Yeah, keep up your work.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Will this be on
Any
the
questions, please let me know.
regular session or on a work session item?
yeah, we'll just push this up if it's not on there. I didn't look. All right, review, we're on tourism business model discussion, John.
Right, this is an issue that seems to be on almost every meeting agenda and this one included. And, it's nice for a change to have a chance to actually have a constructive conversation about this, but staff executive committee that was meeting for several months kind of got into a circular reference kind of pattern of, what's the business model? What does the council want? And should it be more? Should it be less? Is there, are we doing the right things? And then really at a point where we need some feedback from the council to work on something constructively. And there's a couple of things related to this about the current contract language that was basically a boilerplate personal services agreement with the scope of work that's been tweaked a few times over the years, and it's not terribly clear and has some conflicts in it that talked about but never formally amended over the renewal. So we are ending in a renewal period, going into an expiration period here in December 31st. And that for a moment, perhaps. So, I'm trying to get to a place of there's obviously a lot of opinions about tourism. And, is events the city strategy? Are we happy with that? Do we want more or less out of that? The business model, how that is executed is probably a really important part of that. And we're open to, I provided you several models that we've worked on. And it's basically from a more city-led program to a fully third-party contract. And I think both have pitfalls. I don't know if we could financially afford a fully city-led program, all the problems that go along with that as far as procurement and the 24/7 and just the volume of work that's associated with what we've created here. So having a contractor in that equation I see as a really good positive thing for the city. Fully contracted. On the other end of the spectrum, you're basically turning over the keys, and however you agree to pay the contractor, whether it's a fee or a concession or they get a percentage of it, it's some kind of hybrid kind of thing. And that's not that uncommon. We get vendors that come to town and they park in the right of way, they do their thing. And we get like the ice cream man, we get 10% of his gross, 15% of their gross pay. And they get to keep the rest just by use of the right of way. So that's a little different way than we've been doing it, different mindset, but we don't chase them around and ask for a lot of information other than their gross sales. Finding that sweet spot in the middle that gives the city what it wants, ability to people to come and visit and be happy, and vendors are happy. And I think, we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't so successful, really, with what the city's managed to do over the last, ever since the Halloween town just gotten bigger and our contractors taken and just reinvested everything she can put back into the investment to make it bigger, better every year, improve it, tweak it. And still not perfect, still low, certain learning, still growing. But pause there maybe for some comment. B2C has a kind of a transition plan of how they see that a transition might work. If you want to listen to that, and I think it's might be valuable, but to get your thoughts on that.
I'd like to get some thoughts on the contract and what counselors want to see in that, so we can get a little bit further than just a kind of hypothetical, you know, 1 business model, 2 business model, 3 business model. But kind of pick that. We're currently in what you sent us is at number 2. And I've heard that, but I've also heard some like 3 maybe involvement from listening to the council as well. So as far as, because you would want audits and stuff like that. So, and that's where this opens up to get that discussion going. And that's all this is a discussion. Nobody's, we're all.
Whatever agreement we'd have an audit. And when you say audit, I think of the hotels. They 10% of their hotel fees come from the city. So we can go in and we can look at their gross numbers. We're not getting into all their purchases and, you know, expenses. But.
So we would, what I would know from listening to enough people here, and I'll speak, and council can correct me if I'm hearing them wrong, but not just them and a few citizens, is that there would like to be an audit of what the tickets are sold and how many. And so we know for a fact what it is bringing in. And that is definitely something that should be easy to track. If it's online or you're using a Venmo or you have to enter it in, register. It should be something that's what I've heard, one thing, just one. And there's a number of things that we're probably gonna discuss.
If we're looking at revenue, we want to look at all of the revenue.
And
So it would be tickets, it'd be store revenue, it'd be the
I think
vendors.
more importantly, we'd probably like to sit back and look at revamping the contract on a number 2. What that looks like.
One of the things that's happened in the audit business, because of the wireless, you can have a lot of parts that are electronically connected to the center. So anytime somebody buys a balloon or a hot dog or a sphere, you know that it's been sold. And obviously this electronic device is held by the vendor that we've given them because they're being a vendor for us. So the bookkeeping mechanisms have changed rather drastically in the last few years.
I heard, yeah, and I heard Councilor Chilton. I'm gonna allow you to speak, Jessica.
Yes, please. Thank you. Well, just like what John was saying, the audit definitely has to include other things like marketing costs, vending costs. It needs to be like a full audit of the financials in general, if that's the route we decide to take. And I agree that we do need to work on the contract, but based off of what John sent us, it sounds like what we need to start with is the current goals that we have for tourism. The direction that we have for tourism seems like it's coming from 5 different ways. So maybe a good start would be, what are our goals as a council and the leaders of the city for our tourism program?
Yeah, I've offered further, sorry. General, go ahead. I wanted to just state that I've been in contact with our destination marketing organization, Paul Bobo. He said people at Travel Oregon to come and hear the real tourism professionals that are representing government out there to come talk to us if you want to do that. And in conjunction with this process, they're ready as soon as next meeting, they can be here to give you a talk.
So go ahead.
So I appreciate, John, your statement, you're clarifying things. I think this was my goal back in April. Have a calm, rational discussion. And I'll still say it was sidetracked by the big lie that some people in the community continue to bring forward and resorting to facts, character, the intelligence, the motives of council members, either directly or indirectly. And so I welcome this. This is all I have ever wanted. And it has never been a reflection, again, anti-tourism, Tina has done, but a discussion about those goals. And then what is the model? And so I did send an extensive email to John asking some questions about the contract. In my view, it was an inadequate contract. That, as John has already said, there were things that just weren't clear. It was kind of a boilerplate thing that didn't meet our needs. So let's look at the contract. And again, that's not an aspersion on anyone else's, on our contractor, on our vendors, our business people, anyone. Let's look at the contract. So I brought that up with John. By the contract, we do have the right, not as, it doesn't have to, not, we can talk about audit, but we have a right to the books, to the finances. So we haven't exercised that. Let's exercise that. So that's all I've been looking for then too. If we have a contract, let the city exercise its rights.
Yeah.
As just a normal part of accountability and business.
Transparency.
Yeah, transparency.
That's the big one I'm hearing in the community too.
So,
Transparency.
and what I meant, so that I think that the more transparency, the better. And again, it's not to cast any kind of aspersions on what anyone has done, because it comes down to this person said, that person said. I don't know. I want the success of all the merchants, and it disturbs me that there is conflict amongst merchants, whatever motive that might be. And I'm hoping that we can again go through those. So just to say, I think, and I've also, I think I shared this with Matt and John back in the spring too, and I'll show my hand here too. I'm frankly a great fan, and we can discuss this, and I would love to hear Tina's, if she has a transition plan with that, I would love to hear that. I am a great fan of number one, full contractor production of events, that we sell the rights, make money, and I'm for that, because I'm for that we control the trademark, we control the name, but as you said, it looks like Seaside or Astoria, they kind of contractors out, and this is why. If I believe that we have an issue, it is, I think, our lack of capacity as a city with personnel and finances to adequately oversee all of this. So asking Matt to help, track money and things like that. That I think the city should be out of the tourism business in a sense. We support it, we promote it, but let's let the professional entrepreneurs do what they do best. And that would even include, for instance, I think, why do we have a dark market? Why do we have, the city have a haunted hotel? Why do we have that? Why are we competing with, as a city, why are we competing with businesses? Which we are, and I have heard that expressed here on Main Street, that what's at the dark market is in competition with things that are offered. So I'd like to go towards number one, but I don't want to do it right away. I would think a period of transition where perhaps we retweak the contract we now have in order to have this next year come ahead, because I understand that for Halloween Town to be a success next year, I mean, now's the time to do things for all this. So it's not just get rid, but let's have a transition and talk about it. So I would really support looking at a contract that we can tweak, put in place for the next year, but with the long-term goal of having a leisurely discussion about it.
I agree.
That's kind of where I'm coming
I
from.
will agree with your standpoint as far as, sorry, Doug. I'm gonna make this quick. Just on the staffing alone that it takes from us, why maybe it would be a good idea to turn it over just to contractor on it. I agree with that, just on the staffing alone and some of our stuff, that we're trying to accomplish and the attacks, and it's just really it was not needed. It just wasn't, period. And that's public comment, it's allowed for anybody on any subject, so it's just one of those things as elected officials that we have to deal with.
I understand.
Go ahead.
Well, I agree with what you're saying about contract, okay, but we don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Yes.
And I agree totally with what John has mentioned about bringing in professionals who know tourism inside and out. They know what to do. They know how that functions with the state, how the state regulates it, where the monies come from, and from that, we need to, if we had some time to hear those presentations and get involved in those kinds of collaborative process of understanding tourism, and I think the council desperately needs that, then we could make some goals. But why we make the goals, then we can make the contract. We can't be making a contract if we don't know what we're doing. And that's to me, that is so important to understand what we're doing first, then hammer out our goals, and then the contract. So I see it as kind of a process that we go through to involve the issues that Jessica has raised and everyone has raised in the community. We need to understand tourism, and we need to speak
That's it.
well about it.
Yes, we need to understand, you're absolutely 100% right. We need to understand tourism. I'm just sitting here thinking, brainstorming, I'm thinking, why don't we have a meeting, a workshop meeting, if people could get off a day, sit down with these officials to let us know what actually tourism is by definition, and also to get this hashed out and sit down with professionals from Travel Oregon and stuff, and ourselves and staff, and just draw it all up in one day, and know that we have had enough outside help that's sitting in on that meeting. Any questions we had, I was just sitting here thinking, and we get out in the weeds, and no offense, Councilor Topaz, but when you're talking about wanting to audit vendors, that's really above a whole nother level. I mean, they paid for that spot. You cannot, that's a whole nother. So, and then that's what I'm talking about. If we sat down with these people, we could just hammer this out. Even if it was January 2nd, 3rd, not even those meetings, the 4th, and just get it done, you guys. We all want, what I'm encouraged by is we all agree tourism is important.
And I welcome Stephanie's continued participation in this. When I did meet with Tina in the summer or spring, we were talking about contracts, and please correct me if I'm misinterpreting. Tina said that she's here to do what the city asks. That we have that contract, and so I take her at her word for that, and but then that does demand on our part that we do have those structures and the capacity to the trust but verify, as Reagan said about Gorbachev in the Soviet Union. So I'm really trying to take this, to go trust what someone tells me is true, and so I think we need to move on.
How is everybody after Christmas? I mean, that week of the 27th to the 31st.
I'm not teaching.
Yeah, I mean, that might work out for, do you think that's too soon to ask somebody from Travel Oregon, Portland to come out? And
Most people are out of town between Christmas and New Year.
Well, I won't be, I know that, and if we can get a few officials here, I think we could do this in a half day, maybe even. You know, and then that way it's done before the first of the year, because this contract is coming up and we all want to make sure that we have it, something to put out there, and maybe it is with her. We don't know, you know, that's all part of the discussion or the review process.
Yeah, we were targeting December 15th at the next meeting, but that date is
It's
just
busy.
absolutely packed.
It is
already.
crazy, yeah, yeah.
That's probably not gonna do it justice.
And so that's why I was thinking that'd be, still be before the first of the year. If we could do it that week, anytime that week, I'm available. I will make time available for this.
And I can be, I would know not, I mean, yeah, sooner or later the better, but I do think that the current contract, you know, was like settled in spring and then made retroactive.
Yes,
So that is among possibilities of having understanding of going on, but making things.
yes, yeah, we can do that. Correct? I mean, it's.
Yeah, well,
contract's
that's
in
not
there.
ideal.
The contract's in.
If it's more to your point on the model of the third-party contractor, you're not gonna have those kinds of, yeah, it could be back to whenever you want. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not just-
that's why I was, saying, let's put that out.
Depending on the
but We
details.
still need to keep things going and let folks know who know instead of just dropping things.
I certainly like a half day between, after Christmas and before New Year's. It works, definitely works for me.
I'm not teaching.
You, the 29th afternoon.
Yeah, well, any days are fine with me. I think,
You're out of town the whole time?
I'll be here a little bit, but I've got people out of town, I've got people coming to England, so
okay, so
I've got, you know, it's a confusing part of the year for me.
Jessica mentioned the 29th.
I'm still out of town.
For her.
I will be out of town.
Could you
Okay.
zoom?
What?
Could you
Not
join us
really,
by
I'll
Zoom?
be socially involved with family and business. That's what I'm saying. It's, you know,
Well, I think we need to, as a council, move forward. It's not, you know, we wish you could be there, but I think that's a time that works for most everybody. And the 29th is what you're saying, Jessica? I think she froze up.
She said 29th in the afternoon. She
In the
has Wednesday
afternoon?
afternoon.
Yeah, she did freeze up.
Yes, the 29th afternoon, if possible.
Okay, that works for me.
So I'll need to coordinate with our other
Okay,
people,
well, work with John through emails if anybody has any.
our schedules with
Yeah.
other people's schedules.
I'm good, yeah, on travel order and stuff like that, so.
John, do you think we'll be able to get people from Travel Oregon and professionals in at that time? It's awful close.
I will know after I ask.
Yeah.
And if they can't be here, can we just automatically put it on?
Tell them we'll buy them lunch. Tell them we'll buy them lunch. Okay. But lunch is at 1 o'clock because it's in the afternoon. All right, do we, you know, any more information or where to kind of hash this out?
So we have an existing contract. I don't know. Tina has. She has a kind of a bigger picture kind of.
Well, I think I would rather hear what I would like to have her as part of that discussion as far as, you
For
know.
sure. I'm just planting some seeds on how, well. no matter who does it.
Yeah.
In the future, they're gonna need to have some assets, but she's working to, you know, build this program and there's pieces of that and right, that one of the things she's identified are.
Sure, I wouldn't mind hearing your vision. I know what you're kind of going with because the vision and where she's going, right? The model she's trying to do. I've heard this a couple of years ago. And I think it hasn't changed much, so, but.
And I think there's value there. I don't think you need to.
So,
need decisions today, but-
in speaking with John Walsh about how to best move forward with tourism, it's my desire to create an environment where various tourism activities can continue to improve and proceed in a positive direction and be managed by other people.
So my biggest fear is that there are things that need to happen for the continued momentum that we have, which if not done properly is just not gonna, it's gonna falter. And the only reason we're here in St. Helens is because of the previous, contention created by community groups and individuals that literally push the city to do something different. I just happened to be here, one little tiny piece sliver, which turned into a lot more really fast. And at the time, the city did not know any of my background or really anything. I was just doing some display work in the plaza. Part of the exit strategy to put managers in place that can run specific facets of the tourism offerings and responsibilities. This plan would seek out individuals with the right skill set and ambition to take over specific events and corresponding operational responsibilities. My thought on this is very simple. If we did this, we could protect what's been created, and even if one thing did not go as planned, it wouldn't destroy an entire program. This has been the history of every group in the past. Build something and destroy it for any number of reasons. This is why we currently have so many
Can I
people.
stop you right there? I think that's what I hear her saying is contracting maybe through tourism, but having a broader space of allowing other people to contract within that contract, correct?
Yes, and that's why.
It's not just one event. So this would be Rick Scholl's event, or, just
Well-
hypothetically. But through that agency, but I'm asking to work underneath that umbrella too, which makes a big deal too.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons that we do have so many people showing up at the meetings here is that they know the history of the town. And they see how local interference has just made it repeat itself. And so they're really afraid for their businesses that they're watching that right now in real life. We're watching the destruction of something that's been really positive for them. And we need to stop that. I mean, the riverfront has a super strong tourism initiative to get a hotel down here, more eating establishments to invest and visualize everything that can be possible. And those guys all rely on tourism. They're not, that's the very first person they talked to when they came here. Oh, who's your tourism director? That's the first thing they asked. I spent 2 hours on the phone with them. So for example, what I would anticipate would to be seeking out people to run specific areas even of Halloween town activities. The person might not have any experience, but they might have the right skill set with training and help and could possibly manage that piece with, some with B, or E2C giving them some guidance. This would take pressure off of any person or staff or try to find someone to take over the whole program. Crystal King gave really valuable presentation of just what the social media piece looks like. It's gigantic. If the city hires staff, the cost is going to be significantly more, and with more supervisors in place and administrative work that would be unprecedented in this city. With that said, what I would like to do is try to offer a 3-year plan where E2C Productions would continue to proceed with a master plan for tourism, keep it in the black while developing some additional events and strengthening the ones that we already have. This is going to take money, both in payroll and in equipment and in creative development. The city would see less staff at this point in the plan. However, that could change depending on, the council in the future. John Walsh has an outline of what that might look like. But right now we need to invest in people moving equipment for both on land and in the water. Do we want to utilize Sand Island as much as we can for a destination more than it currently is? Without detailing every little piece of what this might look like, it would be difficult because it depends on who steps up for the position, right? Like who would want to take this piece over or that piece over. We might have some people in our active group that are already ready and able to do it. I just don't know yet because I'm presenting this to you. But it's my belief that we could get good candidates. And if they knew they didn't have to work 24/7 and provide frontline insurance for the city and bank accounts and all the finance that goes with that and the reporting and such, and all the back end that it takes to make it work, nobody really sees that. But if they didn't have that piece, it would be a lot easier to recruit people to, to make it happen. And you would have community members involved that want to be involved as long as they, met the bottom line criteria. And in this plan, the bottom line is essentially blame it on Tina. Like if anything fails, it will still be my fault. So, that part would not change. There's also things that Matt and John have suggested, which would make things really a lot easier and take pressure off internal staff. And one of those things is just having all the finance just offsite and controlled by, the oversight group, which would be me, as far as like not having to create two sets of books and the billing process and how the checks come in. And it's really a lot of work for the staff. You just have to see it and then you would know. And I feel like we don't have to have really history repeating itself if we could make a really good exit plan. So let's not do that. Let's build something that's super solid. And keep in mind, this could be worse. It could be a lot worse. Up until we got involved, you guys already spent over $1 million and you have absolutely zero to show for it. Zero. So that's a lot worse than where we are today. Today, we're in a really good position. And reason and conversation are super powerful. We have to ask more questions. And we probably don't even know the questions to ask because if you don't do something for a living, I wouldn't know like how to ask Rick, what should I be asking you when I'm doing a landscape contract? He knows, but I don't know. So I'm not even asking those questions. He already has in mind where he's going with it. So it's kind of like, I feel like we don't ask enough questions. The whole group doesn't ask enough questions. And it's because we don't know the questions to ask. It really is.
And I think that's maybe the huge part about this sit down that we're talking about having is that we are gonna be able to not just take it for what we're
Yes.
gonna have other parties saying no to us, saying, no, that's not really your, or saying,
Yeah.
yes, you should be asking her for this.
Yeah.
Oh, that, if you're not doing that, you should be doing that.
Yeah. And part of it is that we're not used to having independent contractors working like I am. And, I get questions and things like that, really you shouldn't even be asking me because I'm an independent contractor. And then it's like, oh, well, how does that all play out? It's kind of like when you hire your person that's going to do IT, you don't ask them, so what are you going to do when you see a dot XXE black screen come up? You don't ask them that because you don't even know to ask them that. You put a lot of faith in the fact that they can run your entire computer department. And you don't get that with the tourism contractor because it's just so much in your face all the time. It's not like, people are seeing what you see on your computer screen at City Hall and starting to say, hey, how come that happens? It's right out there in the public. So you get a lot more questions. And, that is part of the problem that we have.
Well, I just want to interrupt your presentation for briefly, and you said something that was really important, that we are now and we have been in the black, and economically and financially, I think that's extremely important. But one of the things that I think that I keep going back on is the meeting that we had with our tourism people when they asked the city to bail them out with 55,000
Yeah,
to
yeah.
up to 55 to 70,000 dollars worth of unpaid bills that that put us in a corner and says, hey, are we gonna write a check and keep on going with that group? I mean, or are we going to kind of like take this over ourselves? And that's how it happened. It happened exactly like that, right upstairs.
Yeah.
And we were confronted with a decision of whether we had to belly up $50,000 out of our general fund to pay for what tourism, where tourism was, or start to manage it ourselves.
Do you remember what year that was, Doug?
It was Randy's, darn near Randy's last year, just about 2 years before you came on. It was in his last, I think it was in his last term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, so wasn't familiar with that big of a bell out.
And then, you know, that's, John, correct me if I'm wrong,
No, it's
but
about 2014 with we just said time out on the tourism committee, stopped meeting and
Yeah.
kind of regrouped and.
Yeah,
All right, well,
but you know what?
the point is that we've come a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. You're in such a better place than you were, but it's like, it doesn't feel like that because there's so much contention.
well, no,
So-
and I think they're just it was misconstrued and me listening to everybody more openly. What I hear is it's important to everybody. We just want to make sure that there's too many holes in the contract as far as what we see.
But that's one thing you guys gotta clarify.
So we're gonna
Just
get
the independent
professionals,
contractor
we're gonna get
piece.
professionals in here to assist us, so to assure you that we are going to do this right. And that, and yes, it has come a long ways, there's no doubt about that.
And none of them will have produced events themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, that are coming to talk to you.
Well, you know,
I'm just saying, you know, I just know them all.
Well, that would be something we would.
But tourism is super important and that's the whole reason we're doing it. So I'm glad they're coming because they'll be able to explain that piece to the city as far as like how it impacts the
Well,
city.
I would ask, my other ask after this would be to see if they can sit through with us on the interviewing process and be able to allow to ask those questions because this is so new to us. So we might ask to Travel Oregon and Portland to, and maybe one other outside person is to sit in on a panel. I think that's the way we should do this, is through a panel process like we do any other thing.
Yeah,
Hiring is a panel process.
I mean,
We can do that.
it may be that they haven't coordinated, but I'm hoping that they have been in a situation that they have dealt with people who have, and they can provide that background as well, so they would have.
absolutely. That's exactly what they do.
I have a comment.
Hold on, go ahead.
On that topic, I would also love to hear from the cities that John talked about, like Lincoln City and other cities that use those business models, and maybe getting some feedback as to how those business models work for them with tourism.
Sure, and I know Travel Oregon, because they are really steeped in the coastline, that they will probably have, they're gonna be the experts on letting us know about those cities. I can guarantee you they have very good knowledge. I'm 98.9% that Travel Oregon has a lot of knowledge on those cities that you're referencing, Seaside in particular, because it's so, they get a percentage of that as well, hotel tax, a little bit, so.
Well, and maybe not even just the money or the revenue or how the events are ran, but maybe how the city government is dealing with it. Like, how is it working for them? Has it improved relations with tourism? Has it improved relations with community members regarding these events? Things like that. I'd be interested to know about.
I think I've shared my story before about conversation with the city of Astoria and, you know, what do you guys do about events? And I talked with the city manager about it for an hour probably. And he's, well, we don't do events. Because we write checks. We write checks to the tourism commission, or we write checks to the chamber. We support these strong community partners in other ways. So we're that another layer removed from that model. So yes, though they're supporting them, but they're not even still not having to do all of the detail work that we're so close, this work that we're so close to here when, we're actually in it up to our higher, deeper than we'd like to be. But we don't have those community partners or just don't have the bandwidth. And a lot of that has to do with, they have $1.5 million budget that comes in and ours is 75,000 and or, around there, maybe a little bit more. And there's such a big gap that we have to be super strategic about where we spend our dollars. And we just don't have that luxury of taking chances and making things that don't yield real high.
I agree, and I think the first question that we need to ask those other cities of what they're doing is how much income they're having and how it's spent.
Sure.
Because I think it's unfair if we're getting 75,000 and somebody's getting 300,000, and they're doing this, and this, and this, and we compare ourselves to that. It isn't realistic.
Sure.
It's
So,
like apples to oranges.
I would just, so one of my questions, and I'm just gonna, because we're talking openly and honestly here, is in that when we sit down with Travel Oregon, I'm gonna let them know that we get roughly about, we used to be 100, and it's been lower than that with COVID. With that amount of money, we do 13 nights, we do sandcastles, we do 4th of July, because she did help us out on that, by the way. 4th of July, and then Halloween Town, and then the Christmas ships decorations for 75,000. Are we doing good? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to ask. I want to know if we're doing good on that.
And that's where Travel Oregon can use industry metrics to say, this amount of return equals this.
And that will be.
Yeah.
This is
that will
good
be my
information.
questions on it. Yeah, yes.
Yeah. It'd be awfully awesome if they would come and give you those metrics.
But it's actually 110 that we,
Went down, yeah.
yes.
So we retained
We
10%.
it's 120 that 10,000 a month is per contract.
Yeah.
So it's actually 120. So even for that, that'll be my
Yeah.
question. Yes.
And there's no, there's no question about the work that Tina has done, the time, the vote, and things that go on, and that will be continuing to be part of this whole conversation.
Okay, we're gonna.
I have to like bring one thing forward. This is super time sensitive. And currently, with what we need to cover cost wise, to pay for like vital things for you, for the rent of the Masonic. We have a tram to move people that we have identified that we need to move on. Do you want to do some upgrades on Sand Island, event related, and maybe a boat, which is, a huge challenge for anybody that's going to be here. And, we have had, right now, we can stay in the black and we can move forward with the rent for the Masonic and, the tram, and then, maybe a boat or something like that. But we absolutely we've been looking for these and they have just like come to surface. John can attest, for 3 years, I've been like, John, maybe we could get this, or maybe, and then it's like, it never worked out. And right now the pieces are falling into place to get a tram that can carry 120 people, which would be. City owns everything,
Yes, that's what I'm
everything,
gonna make clear. Everything in the store over there. and
everything,
The haunted house. The whole
everything.
entire complex.
Yes, everything. I mean, I don't want the stuff, but you do.
And she is right, it is time sensitive because the person who owns the building, that one particular,
And we can afford to pay for it. So I want to do
covers
these
its
things.
Cost.
Yeah.
Triple the lease cost or double.
Well, we cover, I mean, this is the thing, when people say, oh, I want to know how much we made in ticket sales, why? You don't know any of the expenses related to it.
But isn't that what the book says? It's not just the ticket sales, it is the expenses, and that's what we need to know.
Well,
So
Matt
we-
has those
So
numbers.
all I'm asking Tina is,
Yeah.
is what we wanted to know as a council. right here, and we're not holding you to it, but does the lease is gonna go up from 3 to 5?
Yeah.
Which is 60 grand,
Yeah,
which is 60 grand a
Yeah.
year. Do you make 120
yeah,
off of the store and the haunted house?
yeah. Mm-hmm,
That's what I need to hear.
Yeah.
That's kind of a, okay, so we're guaranteed
we're
close to
gonna
that.
cover it for
Yes.
sure.
Yes. For the next season.
I'd like to say
Going
something.
1 year out.
And that doesn't have to happen this meeting, it can, but it has to be by next meeting, it should really.
Oh.
I know it should happen this meeting.
Jessica.
Okay, I'd like to say something. So first of all, I would like to see more information on the tram first, like actual documentation of the tram, insurance stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things there. I can't just approve that from just talking about it here. So I'd like to see documentation on that, look into it more. Look at where the cost would be coming from, how would it be ran? Would it be based off of tickets, things like that, just more details on the tram. And second of all, I am not okay with continuing with the store. Councilor Berkeley made a great point, you guys, that we are competing with other businesses down there. It's not right. There's way too many questions going on with the store. I'm not comfortable with continuing on with the store right now. So I'm a no to both of those things today. The tram, more information.
Okay, and so I would state that if we want to continue this tourism and on the limited budget we have, we need 1 more year of revenue, even if we are transitioning, we can't just pull the plug on this thing like what is being suggested right now. I don't care if it's only 1 more year and we're saying this is it, we are moving out, you know, start October, start moving the stuff out.
So are we suggesting that we're not going to sell
No,
t-shirts and
Tina,
things like that?
listen, this, Tina, I need you to actually finish up on your presentation. This is gonna be, Matt, we're gonna put this on discussion for tonight. We'll put this on discussion for tonight. I appreciate that but this is a council decision. And I think, was there anything else that you wanted to have input on the transition part? Because we're getting kind of off.
No, just that it would be, you know, community,
But it is time sensitive and I'd like.
more community involvement if we could transition in this way. That's all.
And if we don't agree tonight, we'll take it to the next meeting, even if it's, well, that's just the way.
I know,
That's just. the
I
way
know,
it
but
is.
that's where, isn't it?
That's the difference between what you do and what we do.
I know,
The way government works is it's really slow.
right,
And it has its process.
Yeah.
So we can't just all of a
I
sudden,
know.
yeah, so it may be next meeting and then that's just the way it is. So it's unfortunate, but we're gonna put it on tonight, Tina.
Okay, thanks.
So, any other, I think we have a meeting set, hopefully around that time. Get this going, we will talk about at least the lease part of the building and the tram, but I think that's sensitive, the lease on that building. Just knowing what's inside of there alone, it would be really, it was not to. Anyhow, so any other quick discussion from any councilors, any open-ended questions that we have not, we know we have a meeting coming up. Good. Yeah, and it always turns this way, and this is what I do not want to turn this into. This is not what's going to happen at our meeting. Okay? We are a council. We make decisions on policies and on citizens. So that being said, we will have professionals there who will help us and everybody will have the chance to talk. And including myself will not, and everybody should have their input. Nobody's gonna be other than maybe Travel Oregon correcting that.
Yeah, if I could just really quickly.
Yes.
I think the difference between what Tina's talking about and what the council's thinking, if I could try to paraphrase it, is that she is cleaning up the revenue, going to be all finances and stuff cleaned up by the end of this calendar year because she doesn't want to hold on to it for taxes and things. That she has created this revenue that didn't exist before, and she wants to reinvest it back into tourism events like she's done every year. Just kind of rolled money back in, brought props, and some years have been higher and lower, but it's the difference between her making those decisions, and it's like the fairy tree or what, you know, whatever kind of new prop, or the metal pumpkin, or the wooden totem poles, or all that stuff. You don't really see that. That's just an expense, and that's just not there. But something like tram is kind of a big deal. Thought you should know that she's thinking about that. Hopefully you're supportive of that, versus you want to see all that revenue that she's created to come back to the city's account, and then kind of have those conversations. I think that's the difference. I'm not going to judge it either way.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That's it. So
Well, I don't know, is it a year-to-year lease with Elliott?
it's a renewal, so it would be whatever we
I mean-
dare to enter into. So
Okay.
and there's enough revenue that you could pay for the whole year lease and all of the tram, and
Yeah.
still have revenue left over to come back in to have reserves and carryovers and things like that.
Yes.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, no, and again, I hope we see that, numbers, black and white. You know, that's just part of our responsibility too, is we can to trust what we're being told, but to know, and certainly that we would get those Matt would be able to provide those figures for us, and we'd be able to see that, yes, the income brings in $60,000 to cover. So.
And right now,
we need
Matt
to
doesn't
it.
see those numbers
Right,
because
and
two
so,
of
right.
them has it.
So we need to see, yeah.
Yes,
We need to
yes,
see it.
and that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, we need to see it. I keep hearing it, but I'd like to see it.
Okay,
I like it, just say it.
shoot, I was hoping to get through most of this
Yeah.
before our 3 o'clock, but it's perfect timing for a break. So we're gonna go ahead and take our 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 3:10.
Okay.
Do we have executive session stuff?
We do have executive
Okay,
session, this
what?
public contracting, or the administration personnel is gonna take a little bit to go through if you want to do it thoroughly. So.
All right, so let's just 10 minutes, but we're almost through our agenda here.
Did you, were you successful in your hunt?
Yeah.
Was this your hunt? This was not your hunt?
Last week I was just going up to decision.
There's no sound.
There you go, Jessica.
Thank you.
All right, good. I'm just going through the code sections of Title II, which are 10 of the 16 sections. So just to make the point that there's a lot to this section. It's not all of it, it's just parts of it. And
So could you go ahead and highlight those points now their sound, because for people who are listening.
what we are talking about is public contracting, the city administrator section, which dates back to 1978, I believe. Municipal court, municipal judges, how we do juries and trials, city library and the library board, nominating procedures for officers, which is the elections component, signing of checks and warrants, the criminal history and background check policies, and then the renaming of the Parks and Trails Commission. So we're not talking about the Planning Commission, Arts and Cultural Commission, Records and Retention, Emergency Operations, Urban Renewal Agency, the Youth Council, which are other provisions there. So to understand this is in a strike through and edit format, so you can follow along to see what's being proposed to be removed and what's going to be new. And I just wanted to frame that a lot of this is existing language. So there's our public contracting code is based off the state's models rules. There's the OR it's called 279. It comes in 3 sections, A, B, and C. So 279, 278, 270, A, B, and C. And that kind of lays out the basic framework that cities need to follow. And most of that's existing. There's some little number tweaks along the way. I wanted to point out that the city council is the local contract review board. So you are the contracting authority. You have the ability to contract with anybody subject to state law and the rules that you impose in these regulations. You also have the ability to delegate authority to the city administrator. There is a tweak in this section of about, it was a $75,000 cap, moving up to $100,000. Quick look when that was last looked at as far as it's been at least several years, probably 2007 since that was last looked at. So whatever your comfort level with that, that's kind of a medium number when you compare it to a budget of $42 million, 100,000. It's not like it's free money to spend. You still need to follow all the processes and report to council and be accountable for that. For those things, it's more administrative. This section 2.04090 also proposes to remove a tiering system that is kind of administratively burdensome. Right now, a department head can spend up to $5,000. If they go over $5,000, it comes to the city administrator it comes to the department head or liaison to sign up. If it's over up to 10,000, it's over 10, that goes to me. And that was kind of proposes to remove all that. I don't know if there's any value of scrolling down through this or not. Yeah, strike through another on screen.
Oh,
Yeah, that would be great.
Apologies, I meant to. I had that thought earlier.
Okay. Jessica, I'm gonna cover up your face on the screen, so if you need to talk, just.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, like I said, that this creating all this bureaucracy kind of thing, we're kind of streamlining some of that. It's not really increasing authority other than the 75 to 100. Just the administrative bumps in between. And mostly we're talking about things that are already in the budget and they're budgeted items. And
ultimately, it's always been the practice for every contract to come to city council.
every agreement comes.
So it felt very cumbersome to get a $5,000 signature, a $10,000 signature, and then go to city council for approval. And then, so it's eliminating that signature process. It's in the budget, it comes to you, you approve it, and we do it.
It's already budgeted.
Yes.
It's already approved.
Yes.
Even if you've already delegated that authority to others, myself mostly, or I've delegated to somebody that will come into the council packet. That's been my policy as administrator here, is that agreements go through the council to become part of that permanent record. And so if we ever have to go back and look, we should be able to find it. we're pretty good. I think we get most of them, so. And
So this was part of the presentation of one of 4 items from Peterson that we're talking about now and have not approved.
And so the history of that comes from our former model of governing, where the council was overseeing a specific department, and the check writing out of that needed to be signed by that counselor and the city administrator and a department head. And then it needed to be brought to the council by report if it was under $10,000 or less. So if it was over, then it had to be a council decision. So just to clarify that and how it used to be, and just streamlining it now.
Yep, and it would take up enough time that it was like, it's in your budget, right? And you've
Right.
already ran it past, the administrator, and it's like, well, yeah,
And
go ahead.
yeah, and then later on, I mean,
Whether it
folks
be
don't
the
recognize,
library,
we're audited,
police, whether it be,
we're audited.
Yes.
For that.
My impression of this, until I have in my hand the ORS numbers so I can compare it, I see, from looking at it from an industrial point of view, a lot of problems. I see too much of variability or availability of John to make decisions without actually, it doesn't say formally informing the council that these things were done. But some of the things I agree with, some of the things I totally agree with. I have not really had enough time to go through all the paperwork. I've got a lot of this marked up, and we also have, as you know, a new set of library rules, which has just been updated, which is not really reflected here. It's just a bunch of stuff that I'm not happy with this until I have in my hand all these ORS numbers so I can compare it.
Again, so,
had all-day classes, several-day classes on just these 3 sections of the.
I know, I'm not saying it's an easy thing.
Have the level of depth on this.
Yeah, I know that, John, but as I say, as I look at this, there's some things that I see big dangers in. And,
Such as?
well, a lot of money can be spent and things done by John that he doesn't even have to tell us. Which, the first step is not a problem, the second step is. And the fact that a number of you people have been involved when this got done way back when gives you a certain familiarity with it, which I don't have, and that's what I'm double checking. That's why I say, until I'm happy that I understand what's going on and what was going on before, I really have some problems with it. Some of the things I just have real problems with.
Some with our new kind of governing policy with a city kind of modeling like
manager kind
a
of.
manager. Then how does a manager work? A manager manages and makes decisions on certain issues, pays the bills, and then reports back to the board. And that's basically how it functions.
Well, not really, because there's a couple of places there should be double checks, and there's no double checks built into it. And the double check is not what's reported to the council, but within it, especially having to do with purchasing. And some of this stuff, as I say, I agree with, but I can go through some of this and say there's a problem with it until I get everything. And in fact, some of this relates to things before and after a couple of times. I'm not real comfortable with the whole thing.
So you don't have a specific.
I've got a couple of specifics, but one, John's spending power should go down to 50,000, not go up. We had a problem with woman night.
Part of our process of doing this, so anybody watching and listening, and I thought you were, maybe you came in just after, but I thought you were part of the governing policy when we started flipping this over. And allowing the city administrator to have more ability, especially within the parameter of the budgets within each department, was to let the city be able to move more efficiently and let it work like it should, and not have to be micromanaged, because we're really policy setters. And then we allow them to to do their jobs, department heads, the city administrator. I have yet to have any issues on any money in my entire 5 years of being here that has not checked out and been audited and won awards and
And I say, I was here after that, sir. That's what, I'm not familiar with it. That's what I'm trying to double check. And some of the things I would definitely like, especially on purchasing, I really would like a single purchasing agent is documentation of where things are coming and going.
So
Not who authorized it,
So
but-
city council does approve all the AP checks every meeting.
yeah, there's account payable bill list.
We do that, but we're not qualified to double check. There's so much,
we are.
what some of the stuff up.
You're happy to ask about.
I know, but as I say, the amount of time to be able to double check stuff that has been brought in or not brought in, that's the bill that should have been paid. I agree.
When you brought up the Luminites question, that was technically actually a tourism event, which based on our contract language, she has the authority to sign on and pay as a third party contractor.
But John was the one who signed it. Originally.
Again,
With
so
council approval,
Not all the council's approval,
a majority,
a majority of
that's
council.
all that's needed.
yeah,
I know,
yeah, so
but that loophole, I would like to close. That's the.
I would disagree with actually that as far as trying to restrict the flow of funds to department heads in order for them to allow them to do their job. I think that, and this is just my opinion, and I'm not really upset with you bringing this and your concern, but it's frustrating at some point when, again, like the tourism thing, but the people coming at that, there's also people behind that continue to come at, and this, drop 4 different things at once. And I really see it. I'm not blinded by it. And it just seems like it's anything to hold up and make sure to find out stuff that's going wrong. Never, ever in my history of working with you, have you really been like on board and it's always, we got a problem here. And you can go back and you can watch council meeting after council meeting and you'll see. Again, I'm frustrated because it limits, again, we are on a time frame and I don't disagree, but you have access to any counselor. You have access to budget, you have access to John, but instead we get a presentation earlier on public comments on something that we haven't even completely reviewed the striking part of it. And there was 4 things that were in there, and one was only partly true, and that was a judgment from a judge who didn't hear none of that. She just looked at the information and because there's already been a judgment on it, I can speak to this extent on it, and just made a decision without even any attorneys being represented. And we all heard that. And that's exactly how that court case went down. So other than that, that's all I'm going to share on that particular case. And we have a lot more information that we have been given about that. So
let's go back to one
that
thing.
being said, I'm tired of sitting up here and trying to make everybody here look incompetent, because we're not. We are true professionals, and I am proud to be on this, and I'd like to continue. Councilor Topaz, we hear your comments and concerns, but we would like to get through this stricken.
You just translated something wrong.
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
I
May I finish and explain? Or are you gonna continuously cut me off and remove my right
No,
to free speech?
No, my objective here is to get us through a work session today in an orderly fashion, as our mantra states on number 12. You want to read it?
No, I don't believe the way you follow it. It follows.
Do you want to read it?
May I finish telling you what I said?
Can you please read? I'll read
No.
12.
Go.
I am
Waste
busy.
time.
Other counselors are busy. City staff are busy. The administrator, he's even busy. Everyone is busy. At this meeting, I will do what I have to. I will do it as fast as possible, and respect the time of others. And a lot of times you could have respected our time by doing more due diligence and not dropping bombs and making a phone call to either Counselor Berkeley, Counselor Morton, Counselor Chilton, or myself.
That's illegal.
No, you can, you can talk about a concern. You're not making a decision. We've had a session with our attorney before, and I'm also gonna request that this is a must, that Bill be here from now on for all our meetings, because here we go, because he's been waxed a few. Now that we're getting intimidated again by certain people coming in, doing counselor comments, and not only that, Counselor Topaz needs to be corrected.
So
Can I finish to tell you what you just said that was wrong? I mentioned that we should have a purchasing agent. All things go through him. I did not say the person from each department couldn't initiate the purchase. I just said where the paperwork had to travel. So we had one single record. And you took that as, I'm trying to cut them out of their business. These are these little details that you get upset with.
What's our financial director?
He's the financial director.
That's what
He takes care of my, no, I'm talking about, we'll say, a nut and bolts person that does purchasing, which is typically what a company does.
So what are you suggesting?
Well, as I finish going through the whole thing, who we designate as the purchasing agent where everything goes through.
That's
So
where we already have him.
No, he pays for it. I'm talking about someone who does
He
the
does.
day-to-day work,
He does
No,
double
no.
duty.
but that's the problem. I don't have a double check when he does everything.
I disagree with that, because experts in their area, when they have it on here, should not have to call to get an approval when they have something online and they're looking at the website and they say, this is what I need. Well, okay, so now I have to make a phone. This is not very efficient. Think of this. Think of this. So now I have to try to jot down the company name, allow that person to get all the information, call them up, and then have them navigate their computer to try to find it, what I need exactly, and there's room for error. You know as well as I do, there's room for error when you start having more people involved. It's the rumor game that you know. So I totally disagree with what you're saying.
Well, that's the way large corporations and large cities function. And we are not a huge, large corporation or a large city. And we have one guy there, I think, that can do it all. He reports. He has everything in writing. He's very accountable to us. I don't see the problem really, Steve.
Well, I've worked for the state of New Jersey, having to do with purchasing of large amounts of equipment and having to go back through the steps. I worked with the FDA, having to double check and having somebody else able to double check.
Those are enormous.
I agree. But when you don't have that, you get into the business of being criticized that he stole the money because nobody double checked it.
Counselor
When you have a double checker, you got that covered, you don't have the problem.
I have not heard one person come
I
into
didn't
this council about
I'm gonna allow
accusing him of
Counselor
stealing the
Berkeley.
money.
I'm gonna allow Counselor Berkeley to have the floor.
Counselor
Could
Topaz.
you lower your mask, please? Sorry.
I'm so used to telling my students, cover the whole thing, cover the whole thing. So thank you. I mean, we're even supposed to wear masks at the times when the students are allowed to be unmasked when they're eating and things. So
Sure, yeah.
thank you. So Counselor Topaz, I heard originally you had some concerns and you wanted to check out the ORS, and I think that's perfectly legitimate. I also heard this is a first reading tonight.
Yeah.
So that what I would find helpful, Counselor, is if you were to check that to your satisfaction. And if you had specific things, then come with a specific suggested proposal or amendment that concrete that we can look at and work with.
I agree.
And so I think.
Can I further that? If that he comes up with something, that he contact John in order to talk to our attorney to make this more efficient, because this isn't the first time this has happened where it was waiting until the evening session when the attorney wasn't here this is a continued pattern as far as it's really, and I'm not trying to, I'm trying to be as respectful as I can, but you really take a lot of time away from the city on purpose, is the way it appears to this mayor presiding over this meeting, is that you just like to disrupt and cause dysfunction and try to make everybody look incompetent in the process. And again, I could be wrong, but you could go look at the entire history of you being on the city council. And I would like to see some highlights of the opposite of what I'm saying. Of the opposite.
What happens if you are incompetent, not right?
I didn't say that.
Accept that as even a
I
possibility.
said I'm not legal. I said, could you take what you find,
And
tell John, and have our attorney look at it? I'm not an attorney. I don't to pretend to
When
be. I
Councilor
stated that
Berkeley is
before.
done, I'd like to speak.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Councilor Berkeley, did you want to finish?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, well, I just want to say that, just to be really clear, that when I'm asking questions, I can't speak for any of the other counselors, but when I'm asking questions, it doesn't come out of a place of attacking or questioning our city staff. It's because it's my job as an elected official to ask questions, to make sure things are running properly. It's not an attack. In fact, if I wasn't asking questions, then there would be a problem. But I will just be the first to say, when we get 184 page reports that we're expected to read, there's no way that we're reading all of those thoroughly. And if you're saying that you are, you're lying. So I understand why Councillor Topaz is saying that he thinks there should be a check system. There is no way for us to check every single thing, nor do I think we should, but I do think that we should have a proper check system. So one of the things that I seen on here that I didn't agree with was changing the follow-up to a department counselor. I think that there should be follow-up to a department counselor. One of the reasons for that is when Councillor Morton had an issue with a contract, he found an issue that there was overages found. He brought that to our attention. I think that if that would have been brought to him and explained to him as the council liaison for that department, I think that would have been a check system instead of it coming to the council and wasting everyone's time. So there's a perfect example of why that could be beneficial to continue on with that. There are other issues that I found in this also. One, the removal of the position number for running for city council. I didn't think that we confirmed this change. Where are the results from the survey about this?
That was discussed back in, it was August 4th meeting that we had Bill Monahan come and speak to you. We did send out a survey. We did show you, I thought we shared those results with you. I can go back onto SurveyMonkey and pull those results to show you. It was a majority of council that said they did prefer the popularity vote. And I'm happy to share those again if I did not, and apologize if I did not send that out.
Okay. It's just one of those things where I didn't recall seeing it, and I just want to follow up from something that we've discussed publicly and make sure that this was something that we've done our due diligence with before completely changing it. So that's a question that I have. I would just like to see the survey, maybe how many people answered the survey, get some more input from community people. Otherwise, I'm totally okay with doing that. Yeah, those are the two things that I noted after I read through the issues. But like I said, I think that it would be beneficial to have a council liaison for the administrator. I don't see why we shouldn't continue on with that. And I don't see it as wasting city time.
No, and so what he was questioning, so I can clarify, is a policy that's already in place. It's already in place. He was questioning the authority for a bigger dollar amount of that. There was, and maybe I'm the only one that's seeing it, but we can go back and watch on other meetings where I'm not gonna sit up here and if I'm doing the same thing, this is absolutely a place that we need to do this. That's what it says in our mantra. Is that we are, but if I haven't done all I could do prior to, and I agree on this one topic that you brought up today. But there's been plenty of opportunities in the past to do a due diligence, to make a phone call to city staff. And not even city related that have been dropped on our plate. Okay, that's what I'm discussing here, Jessica. I definitely am not saying nobody should ask questions. That is not what I was, if that is what I was conveying to you, I thought it was pretty clear, but if that's what you heard, I apologize that you heard that. What I was trying to express is that if we have not done our due diligence prior to the meeting, and I agree on this one packet, it's big and lengthy, and there's a lot stricken out. We are on the first reading. There is nothing that is approving this. We have a whole nother 2-week period before it could even be adopted. All we're doing is a reading on it. Discussion could happen between now and the 15th with any staff member. That's what I was trying to convey here. And you can also call a counselor. You can. We're not making a decision till the 15th. You can call a counselor on any one of those and ask them their opinion. And I am right. And if you want to go ahead and file an ethics complaint against me, you can. Okay?
May I speak?
So that being said, that's what I was trying to convey.
May I speak?
Absolutely.
Good. On due diligence, many times when I'm checking on the council, on the staff, I'm not gonna check on the staff because I know what answer they gave me because they've already given me. I will check on it from somebody outside the city, other legal people or other entities. So when I drop something on you and you say you didn't do the due diligence, I didn't do the due diligence in the part that you wanted me.
Well, so
Two, once upon a time, I sent in the very beginning a piece of information, just information, emailed it to every one of the counselors. And Bill Monahan says, well, that's illegal because basically what you're doing is making a point for a decision. And yet that particular information was not even going to be up on any of our commissions. So in the very beginning, I was told I could not talk to more than one commission by our legal counsel. That's what was told. We go way back to 2019.
Absolutely correct, because it would be considered an illegal meeting.
That's correct.
And so if it's an illegal meeting that way, then it's outside the realm of our public.
That's correct.
But you can talk to a council person one-on-one.
So what I'm gonna say about
Not
that.
serially.
So what
I
I'm-
cannot go from you to Pat to Jessica to him. That's basically a serial meeting that again
No,
is illegal.
if you're not making a decision and you're talking about an idea, you are perfectly able to, there's nothing ethically wrong with that. Now, perception, yeah, because we're talking about it, perception, you can technically, but there would be no legal finding if no decisions were made. People could throw a big raise, big stink about it. But ethically, there is nothing wrong with that.
Correct.
No,
But that's why I was
perception,
told you couldn't
perception,
do.
it is not illegal. It's illegal if you make decisions in those conversations. It is not illegal. I've been through this time and time again. I am gonna talk to them blue in the face that we can do that. Now, perception, people may be able to read, well, you can see some meetings, where you can tell that council has talked and has not made a decision, but pretty much affirmed the direction they were gonna go. And you can watch them, not just here, county commission meetings, all over the county, all over the state senate, the federals, they all do it. They all do it.
Called going across the aisle.
House, yeah, that's right. So exactly, called going across the aisle. And so, again, I'm gonna come back to what I was just trying to state, is that if we have any questions, I'm trying to get through this in an orderly fashion. Councilor Topaz, your discussion started at roughly about 3:12, about 3:15. Or even 3:16, we're a half hour into this discussion and we've only gotten 2 pages.
Well, that just shows you how important it is. Now, if important is only 2 minutes long, then we're not gonna be done by 7
And I'm
o'clock.
not disagreeing that we shouldn't be able to ask questions, but we have literally taken a seminar or a work session on this topic of, can we discuss things with Bill Monahan at the rec center? The entire council has been there on that one. Matt, do you have any issues with this piece of? Go ahead.
If I can get us back onto this, please. This is perhaps we shouldn't have started with public contracting code. It's complex, right? There's a lot of pieces to it. It's for anybody, there's challenges and conflicts and subtleties and just a lot going on here. But the city administrator is the administrative head of the organization. They are the purchasing manager for the city. It says so right in the code. It hasn't changed for decades. And what we're talking about is streamlining the process, getting the little bureaucratic bits out of the process. We understand that there's a liaison piece out there that people are kind of grabbing onto, but bigger organizations, city manager, that is in the weeds. I mean, this is a lot of extra little steps, and we're drowning in work right now. And we're so overflowed a bit. And does that create some vulnerabilities? I don't think so. Everything still ends up at the council. It still goes through the registers. It's checks that are, expenditures are part of, there's an accountability piece to me and my position. And we see this as a point of streamlining. That's about it. And I know that's a little bit of a change, but it's, department heads running to, to me, they're running to, Margaret's driving over here just to get a signature for this. And it's just a routine kind of thing, the expenditure. And
still Oregon contracting laws too that state when you go over a certain dollar amount or a certain level of service, you have to get 3 quotes. You have to show those 3 quotes. You have to go out for an RFQ or an RFP. So we still have to follow all those processes when we get to that certain dollar amount that is stipulated in the ORS that is also reflected here.
It's that understanding that makes us readable or not readable, and that's what I've got to come up with. Because right now I disagree with it. But as you say, you need 3, not 5, not 1. You need a dollar amount. I'm trying to find out. We were regulated by the state. I have to agree that a lot of this should be streamlined, but it's got to be double checked. And a lot of this has grown over the years and should just be flat out eliminated. No problem with that. What I'm saying is this piece of paper is too confusing to say this is a good piece of paper.
so this starts off with roles and responsibilities. It moves on to contracts, classes of contracts, of which there's a lot. It talks about the different varieties of what tiers of spending, which require what, and it goes, this, we could get a few more pages here, we'd probably get through it. And
As I say, there's some things I disagree with. The overall intent I agree with. But it's pieces. And until I know what these numbers mean, I probably will say no, because I want to see what the state law says first. And some of the state law, because the way the state law is written, we're exempt from.
Well, the double check is quite obvious to me. John writes the check. He double checks on that.
No, that's not a double check. He's his assistant.
Okay, so he looks at it, okay, and then it comes to the council. And before it comes to the council, the department head signs off on it as well. So it goes through a system.
Yeah,
And then so where do you want to weigh in with that system of what's going on with our staff? Our staff has it down and you're saying it isn't good enough. And I can't agree with that because it does get double checked. What you're interested in is you double checking on it, and you can do that at the council level. Jessica said you know, I brought one thing up that I wasn't clarified on. And I wanted to get clarification on it. It was a bill for,
It was for the sidewalks, the overage on the sidewalks,
Right,
which I am and I actually have been notified of
Right.
it, and I didn't convey it to Doug.
so,
So again, it was reported, I just didn't convey it to Doug, and then I tried to keep it in general because I didn't want to say there was some
Right,
oversight
right.
on the engineering department that allowed this contract to be open-ended a little bit, and it was muddy. And that's exactly what happened at the time.
Okay, one of the problems with John and Matt, John's and Matt, one's assistant to the other. So whatever they do, it's basically legally one person. If he was totally separate,
No, it's us two, we approve it. Okay, I know,
Can we
Councilor, I
allow
don't want to get through.
our
that.
city administrator to go through the report, and if we have questions, maybe put those down, write those, but at least allow him to
That's
go
what I
through
want.
this.
That's what I want
And
to.
then if there are remaining questions, then please ask him, but I'd like to.
I vote we don't talk until John gets through this.
okay, good.
I'm throwing that out there right now.
go ahead.
Go. Council President Morton. Councilor Thomas.
Yes.
Councilor Chilton. Yes, Councilor Berkeley. I as well.
All right, thank you. So we made it through roles and responsibilities unscathed almost, but section goes on to 2.04, 110 is talks about additional definitions. So you're just cleaning up some definition language. Nothing's changing there for several pages. One of the get down to 2.04, 110 processes for approval of special solicitation method exemptions, and that is mostly stricken. That's
Can you pull it back up on the screen, please?
Yeah, trying to-
So,
John,
You're
you're in cover it too, can see it.
or page 62, if that makes a difference, if you're following on a hard copy. And that essentially is what Mr. Peterson was criticizing the council of creating exceptions to the state law. That's been there for a long, long time, and it's come in valuable sometimes in some kind of weird, quirky types of contracts we need to enter, where it's just changing a selection to solicitation, language cleanup, and striking a lot of superfluous kinds of things there.
So what was he referencing there exactly? So.
One strike against three.
Okay, I'll come back to it.
It was too tempting. So then we get into the various classes of contracts, and I'm just, there's several here, and I'll just mention them by title. Purchases from nonprofit agencies and disabled individuals have a class. Public improvement contracts have a class. And when you think about public contracting, there's things that are public works and there's things that are public projects, and there's subtle differences that have big meanings in dollar amounts and spending and processes, and there's a lot of moving parts there. And there's personal service contracts, which we talked earlier today about. Within those classes, there's subclasses, and each of those has tiers of decision-making authorities, dollar amounts that are related to that, and processes that are required to that as well. And there's a few cleanup languages here, mostly taking financing out, because financing, when we enter into agreements with financial institutions, that's an outright exemption. You don't need to go there. So we clean that language up throughout here. City wants to do banking services with a bank, they can pick whichever bank they want to work with. That's an automatic exemption. Hybrid contracts are a class, and that's getting into things like design build and how you do your construction management contracts. We had one a few years ago with energy saving performance contract ESCO with Amoresco doing our street lights. They have a special procurement method that you can work directly with them in the state law, and our code allows that. Contracts for goods and services, that's a little different than public works and prevailing wages and health process. There's and this is all existing kind of things. I just want to acclimate you to this subject to, and there's kind of a catch-all here. Contracts are subject to award at solicitation agent's discretion. So advertising, that's amendments, that's things like purchasing your police dog is an exact thing that you can just purchase direct. And there's another, goes through the whole alphabet here, different things of, contracts up to 5,000 is a big one. We don't have to go out to bid for things less than 5,000. But we still have to track our process of why we came to that decision. Usually it's a good idea to get the number of bids and things. Copyrighted materials, equipment repair, government items, non-owned property such as surplus. It's not city owned, but we're surplusing sole source contracts, specialty goods for resales, sponsor agreements, structures, renewals of contracts don't necessarily need to be competitive, but in some cases they would be because they can have a cumulative effect and they reach a dollar cap that would make it automatically go back out. Extensions, renewals, temporary ones, temporary use of property owned by the city isn't a class. There's a whole section on emergency circumstances where declarations emergency, there's things that need to happen. That's if you're still tracking your process you go through. Federal purchasing programs, the city can piggyback with either other public entities or the state or feds on purchasing contracts where they can basically, there's a secure price, so we can just not have to go through that process and say this, we can buy a truck from Ember on the state bid kind of thing. Or that's again like the cooperative procurement contracts, the same kind of idea there. Then surplus property, there's a process for that. Concession agreements. And then now we're to the class of contracts. We're talking about the solicitation processes. There's informal, there's formal, there's qualified pool. It's probably too much to go into right now. I'll just kind of leave it at that. There's no changes in these sections other than, occasional code section site that might. This whole appeals process that we get into about debarment and so there are other pieces about local preference and things. And that's as quick as you can talk about that. So the next section, if we want to stop, you want questions there? You want to go through the whole lot here? So
go in.
Okay. So the next one is city administrator. And this one is striking language that is fairly old in our code. It's been there a long time. It talks about it's at a time when we had the city didn't have a city administrator, then we had a city administrator, a city recorder, and the city administrator was the recorder and the finance director, and they're all the same people, right? So we're cleaning that up, just saying that that we have a position of city administrator, and we're removing the financial department head piece of it because it's already purchase agent, and then basically the job, just the job description prevails. Basically, you have all the powers delegated by the council, and the duties of the position listed in the job description, which we have adopted. It's fairly fresh, and then the salary will be paid as part of the annual and representative scout salary schedule there. The next section is judges. No, it's municipal court. And there's some tweaks here. A lot of it's getting the restated judicial code, or code basically restates the ordinance that code in whole, and we're just giving it a reference, getting rid of several pages of code there. If there's anything else substantive, you'll see on tonight's agenda that there's a process. This requires that the judge's contract is by resolution, and whether it be a professional services agreement with a resolution. And we're cleaning that up tonight because that was one of the benefits going through this, is we realized we needed to do that, and we're doing that. So basically, we're going to adopt by resolution something that's you've already approved. Salary, the same thing as for their professional services agreement. the whole judicial code taken out, so paper diet there.
Judicial code, we're just referencing the states, is what you're
Just
saying.
Yeah, and as that changes, this, you know, that's on the city, and then we don't get in these spots where things change, it get out of date, or where there's things that weren't important yesterday or important tomorrow, and things change and we're out of date. So, I don't know if you want to hear about all the pre-trial conferences and just cleaning up language. Moving on to the library and the library board, taking the, highlighting the librarian is now the library director, striking the council responsibility that's restated later on. As far as the liaison, it's still here, just a different section. Section about gifts and bequests that I'm not going to read because and they have a library board and talks about the designated liaison to the library board. It used to be library mission, so there's some cleanups there.
Is there any language, I don't see any language where a liaison to the library would be the optimum pick for the library board? And does the mayor appoint to the?
It does say the mayor's.
By the mayor.
And this section was fairly well vetted by both Margaret and the library board.
Is that the new one that was approved by the library board, has been inserted here?
Yeah.
Because that was brand new.
So there is no library director though.
No, there is. It's
No, I heard it. I heard it.
There's no librarian anymore.
There's a library director.
Librarian was like the head.
I heard
I heard no library director anymore.
There is.
Should probably tell Margaret.
That's what I heard.
She's retiring anyway, so.
In public comments is what I heard.
Not an issue.
Yeah,
There is a library director. There will be.
the public comments, I was a little thrown
I-
off by that. I was like,
I think that-
that one is news to me.
So then there's things about the library board and their terms of office that they've fully vetted. Process for vacancies, removal, resignation. Some of that's just changing commission to board. Most of it is actually putting in a succession of past chair, chair, and vice chair. That's forward thought on that. Succession of, a lot of our, take a little aside right there. We don't do like a lot of boards have becoming president and then or commission chair and then past chair, kind of work through a session where you build up leaders and then the leaders lead for a while, then they kind of exit and then kind of run people through a process. The library board is proposing to do this here, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah. So just as a question to that, the library board makes recommendations and reports to the council. Is that correct? I know the Arts and Cultural Commission used to make recommendations to the city on a almost a monthly basis. Whenever we would have our first council meeting, they would be here to make recommendations. Does the library board make recommendations to the city council? And do they rely on a liaison to do that? How do they do that?
Yeah, I'm trying to read it quickly with that lens. I know traditionally they have.
Generally, the words come by Margaret.
Right, through the president.
Or the director, the library director.
So the library boards makes recommendations to the librarian or the director of the library. And so is that director of the library on the library board?
The library board makes recommendations to be sent to the city council. The council is the one that makes final decisions.
Right.
So it's you're trying to figure out who's the one that's supposed to be delivering that recommendation. to
That's
the council.
correct.
It would be the president of the library commission, should be.
Library board,
Yeah, yes.
okay, rather than the director of the library.
Would be.
I don't know that that's addressed in here in that way.
Okay, so
Hence the board.
we had some problems with that with the Arts and Cultural Commission some time ago. But anyway,
Whether it's the chair or the staff person or.
the staff person, yes.
There was
There was a
typically
rub-
been a director that brings.
Who's the board?
recommendation on the liaison.
That's the way,
Sorry.
when I was on it, that's how it was done. We could suggest things, but we trusted Margaret to present it to council.
And the annual report was generally given by the head of the library committee.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
So yeah, meeting responsibilities. Some about ad hoc committees and working on. And I think that's it for that. The yeah, we're nominating a couple more here. I actually meant to print it out the code to put a table of contents to this because it doesn't have headers on the top, so it would have been helpful and probably would have done that. Okay, this is about the nominating procedures for city officers, and that is elections basically, and changing that form from having a number of positions to a popular vote, which Bill Monahan talked about several times. I know that there was a survey.
Yeah, we
Survey.
talked about it for the first time back in June or July. You had a conversation with John that was led. We then had a discussion at the first August meeting with Bill Monahan. And we got direction to go through a survey, write an article. That article was posted in the August or September newsletter that went out. That included some social media outreach as well as posting in the newsletter, link to the survey link. What I found was that basically 69% of the people that voted preferred the majority vote as opposed to the per position vote. I'm happy to send you the comments. 90% of them do not relate to the question.
Yeah.
They're just random comments that are not very helpful.
I
So
remember this. I remember this.
it is exactly 100 people that voted from our community on this, and 69 out of the 100 preferred the majority vote.
What is the percentage of 100 people versus the population?
14,000.
14,000 now is our technically our population. So to give you a frame of reference, the community survey, I think, brought in 400 to 500 people. And that was a huge engagement process. This was some social media posts and the newsletter.
So less than 100 to 1%.
Yeah.
But getting 100 people to survey and take time out of their day to actually even answer one question is huge.
I agree. The flip side is that very many people.
Correct. And you can see how much effort we put into the
Yeah.
community engagement survey, and we get 400.
So it's something to base our decision on.
Correct. And I'm happy to send this to you if you would like through email, so you have it for your records if I did not send it to you earlier.
I need it, yeah. Yes, please.
Okay, signing of checks and warrants, the this is again something that both legacy cleanup with as far as having the recorder being in charge of all things. Now we have a finance director, city administrator, city recorder, and then the council, the mayor, and the council president proposed to be authorized signers on city accounts, and dates back to 1979, so it's been around a while. Most, the banks don't care if it's two signatures. Two signatures is organizations that still do that. I think it's pretty
That's basically up to the organization to decide what they want.
It's a bygone era. And there are, I'm check signer on CSET and COPAC and, you know, and it's two signers, Henry, and I often sign. But it's, and they don't have a lot of bills, so that helps, so. Doing the checks for the, well, the COVID money going out into the community, it was in grants, so. That's it for that. Now we're moving on to the criminal history and record check policies, which it's like access into the state system. There is a point of contact. I'm that original license holder for the organization, but it's a lot of people that access it every day and use it every day. They have user licenses at meeting. They're working through a meeting. We're kind of changing that so that's so clear. So. Then there is the very controversial Parks and Trails renaming to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Which has already been something you've talked about extensively, recommended to the council, and that ship has sailed unless you're just where it lives in the code. So. There's also a little bit of new language to talk about as far as this, providing a secretary to the Parks Commission and whatever staff and consultants that might be appropriate.
I would like to say on the Parks and Trails that the Bicycle and Pedestrians Committee that we had was it was inept, and I feel it was because of leadership in from the council point of view, but it went down to hardly any. They could have a meeting several times, so we moved that into adopted that and consolidated that with the Parks Department. That's why it became Parks and Trails. And in the interim, we took committees, developed committees within the Parks Commission. And there is a trail committee, and there's a 1 person to 2 people who are kind of on the Bicycle Trails Committee as well. So it's been adopted very nicely, I think, into the Parks and Rec Commission. And so Parks continues to be an influx of different, with recreation, with bicycles, with pedestrian pathways. So, and it's set up so that we have those committees that reports.
So page 62 was illegal, is what we want to come back to that because that's what was referenced earlier. There are comments and revisit language there.
I don't know that to be illegal. If it is, it's been that illegal for a long time. So
apparently we're making our own laws.
and we do have the right to make not wholesale law changes, but there's a process that you have to go through to do that. And just say that you can't do it.
I mean, I don't claim to be an attorney and I don't have access to attorneys. I wish I did, I wish I had some friends that were attorneys. Actually, I do have one, but he just does fraud cases, but.
This was reviewed by our attorneys as well.
So we're reviewing our attorney, one of the things we want to bring to you in the new budget year is looking at what having a staff, generalist attorney, contract attorney. Part of the staff, our legal expenses are so extraordinary that it's worth visiting.
There was once upon a time, wasn't there, for a while?
Yes.
A number of years ago.
Peter, years and years ago.
Yes.
We had one after that too.
We did?
Peter, or Richard Apatow.
Anyway, that's. I can see a lot of compelling reasons to have an in-house counsel to help sort out some of these things.
I suggested that a few years ago. It was too soon.
Well, actually, it probably wasn't.
Hindsight.
Could be hindsight. Okay, city administrator report.
Come on the menu today.
You are.
Well done or over easy, I don't. Medium rare.
All right, I'll try to get through this. First of all, I wanted to start with the GUFA award. Matt, it continues again to achieve that award, which is, evidence of our transparency and professionalism, and the finance. When our budgets are really, they're nice looking, they're well put together, they're easy to read.
Good job, Matt Brown.
I think there was only like 5. There was
As of,
very few.
as of last week, there was only 5 cities that have been awarded this for this last year.
But where you go?
Something to be.
How many?
240.
That's not a good.
It's not good for the rest.
Not good for the rest of them.
I know, it's easy. If somebody says, the fact is you're not very good, the fact is the others are so bad.
Well, I think it's because he's very good.
Absolutely.
Extremely.
Okay, the second is kind of a housekeeping issue with, it's not technically a water leak, but it's a person that had an overage in their water bill and requested the city council, and I want to get it in front of you so you can understand that. Do you have a copy of this?
I do.
Yes.
Yes, and I read it,
You've all seen this, so he's the bill came to $224.53. He says his bills average 55 to 80. I asked Matt to look into that, see what we come up with, and I think his 224 was for the whole bill, and
That's what my question is.
so an adjustment of, if you're so inclined, of 154.18 would be appropriate. Again, it's not a leak. He left his hose on. He, put some timers on things nowadays. This is good.
So, but it is consistent. I'm sure Matt reviewed it. He was consistent.
Yeah, our utility billing staff reviewed his last average, figured out what that average would be for a bill, and then what the full leak adjustment would be, which is a number on the bottom.
You have a formula for that in the water
Correct.
department.
Yes,
Yeah,
we have a formula. We
familiar
don't
with
give
that.
the full amount, but it's called a full leak.
Exactly.
And so it goes back to, makes his bill whatever the average would be for the last few months during this time frame.
So what did that figure end up to be?
That's on the bottom of the page, 154, I think it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to move that to tonight's agenda. As
Yeah.
an agenda
Yeah.
action item. Matt or Kathy, make a note of that, so you get here in a second. Moving on to the RFP/Q for the Parks and Trails Recreation Master Plan. Get hard to say recreation. Went through a solicitation process. The reason I hesitated on the P and the Q is that the proposals typically have a cost component to them and qualifications. You're picking the most qualified contractor that you feel like to work with, and that's what we're doing here. And the selection committee consisted of myself, Matt Brown, Carmen Dunn, Jenny, Tim Joe,
Jenny and Shauna.
Shauna. You went and get 2 proposals back. One of them's Angelo Planning Group was the preferred contractor to work with, so we're requesting that we authorize staff to come back, work with them to develop a scope and a budget, and come back with a number. Look like, so there's no final decisions right now, it's just proceeding. And back to some more information to look at.
I think we should have had a council representation on that committee. My input.
I think we did ask at a previous meeting, but it was not decided who it was, because I think if I recall, there was a timing issue of when we were gonna do it and somebody was not available. I'm not sure if that was you or Jessica. But I know we did talk about it, but a person was not specifically suggested, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong.
I think you're right.
Anyway, just a point that as you go forward, I
Yeah,
think
and
that's
maybe it was
consideration to have
oversight or conflict, I can't say for sure.
liaison of some sort, but
Anybody is welcome to read through this proposal if they like, to come to whatever conclusion they like, and I only have one of each, but.
go ahead.
You first, you are the
Thank you.
those guys, so you first.
We could probably.
I do have electronic versions that I can send the council, both versions, if you would like that.
Okay.
And Councilor Topaz, I can print off paper copies.
Pick them up in my box as usual.
We'll get you that, and again, there's no decisions other than. There is. I mean,
Yeah, we were hoping to get your approval tonight to move forward with negotiating the scope
With
and
this?
the amount.
scope in the budget.
If that's okay, unless you would like more time, then we could come back at the 15th.
If you can get this to me, I can look through it electronically and I can get this to Patrick.
I'll have it to you as soon as we're done with this.
Thank you.
Sounds like we need more time.
Send that to my Gmail account. Thank you.
I just curious to see what it looked like.
Okay,
I started to interrupt you, but tell us a little about how that you narrowed it down to the one specific. That one, where I was looking at. Was the others just not complete, or were they disregarded in any way?
I think there's only two.
The one that was selected had a little bit more experience working specifically with the city of St. Helens on some past transportation plans. So that led to some of their additional knowledge that they had.
Yeah.
And it seemed like from the group that they came to the consensus that the final reports that we reviewed as samples from other cities' park master plans, the Angelo report looked a little bit more professionally done and what we wanted as opposed to the other candidate.
Thank you.
That didn't appear as well done as the Angelo ones.
I think that's pertinent, and I hope, Patrick, you heard that.
I did.
Okay, thank you.
And the samples that were done by Angelo were, I believe, the city of Independence, which is very close model to our city. And then I believe a couple cities on the coast. I want to say Seaside or Astoria.
yeah, there's some really good
They
compliments.
had a little bit more experience in the Pacific Northwest.
And the cost compared to the other companies?
At this point, we did not ask for cost. According to Oregon public record law, or Oregon purchasing laws, there's some questionable whether we can ask for a cost or not. So at this point, we get to a point where we have a preferred vendor. And then once you approve that as a council, then we go back and discuss negotiation of a scope and a cost.
Thank you.
Well, or Oregon law, don't you?
Yeah, so the Riverwalk and the Streets project, excuse me, they're both moving along really nicely. We're trying to get that 30% design. We're already engaging with our team on getting the next proposal out for the developers' interest, trying to make sure that we don't have any holy pitfalls and we can get it out finally about January. All right, January 5th, 19th, have the request for proposals for the developers for the waterfront. Prior to that next meeting, we're gonna have a Riverwalk forum, and that's gonna be fantastic, trying to get that to 30% design.
Yeah.
And then come up to 100% design. On the 11th of January, the library director recruitment is going to occur. There's gonna be, this first day is gonna be a Zoom, and then the following week on January 17th, after the groups, there's a couple panels that are gonna pick who they want to come back on the 17th. We're gonna do in-person interviews. The 18th.
17th is gonna be the tour and with the finalists and the reception with the finalists in the early evening.
She's got it.
He's recognizing it. I'm trying to make one sentence out of it. It's actually many pages long. So at our January 5th meeting, we had talk about the Urban Renewal Agency, the projects, how urban renewal works. I intended to have that meeting. We've had some internal discussions of why don't we just have an urban renewal agency meeting and talk about the same things? Okay, so we're gonna, your concurrence, we're going to do that. There's also an opportunity here to create some separation in the budgeting sections of right now it's really confusing which hat you're wearing. If you're at the Urban Renewal Budget Committee, or if you're at the regular city budget committee, or if you're in an urban renewal meeting, or if you're in a regular city council meeting. So we're going to propose that we try to do the budget earlier in January, mostly because the budget right now is so basically all the revenue that we receive and money's tracking fairly close to our anticipations, which is fantastic. It's just going into contingency for projects. We don't really anticipate spending any money for the next year or two, and getting into a cycle where we do a urban renewal budget happens in January, the regular city budget happens in another portion of the year. The budget committees can be the same members. They don't have to be the same members. There is another opportunity there because they meet so infrequently, is to do a longer term budgeting, go from an annual budgeting to a biannual budgeting. If there's some interest there on at least the urban renewal component for that, that would trigger a couple other layers as far as the budget committee has to be able to go 4 years instead of 3 years. So then we'd have to figure that out for the urban renewal agency. Again, administrative streamlining, there's no agenda here, it's just having less meetings, more productive kinds of.
Well, I think to keep it tighter reins on it, I would like to see even projected projects that are in the works, because I'm sure we're gonna crush last year's anticipated of 190, whatever it was. Sure, we crushed that because it was very conservative and I questioned it at the time. And if within the parameters of the urban renewal, some projects did fall in our lap as an urban renewal agency, because we're not in that right now. We're actually city councilors. You're totally right, but
Exactly. So it's
but we don't anticipate spending money, but there is a possibility.
And there is, and that's why it's all put into a contingency. Because come in, and there's, we could put money in different categories, and it wouldn't really mean anything if we don't plan to spend it. And that's just a policy decision. So that's a lot. So there's a couple pieces there if you're interested in making that a budget committee meeting.
Was it 191 last year?
For urban renewal,
Yeah.
it was 54,000.
That was it?
But like John said, this year it has come in above projections, and it's actually, I think, on the medium growth instead of a slower. So it's looking very favorable right now.
And the prize with that is that we're looking for, we have a very large loan that we're gonna have to service in about 3 years. So we're looking for a debt service fund. That money is designated to help pay for that.
Well, we're paying for my new car. I get that.
We don't have the interest. We don't even have a contract yet because the state's been so slow. And that's good because we're it's 3 years past construction. So
With this mess going on in Washington about the government making believe they're gonna throw money, or does it look like we're in line for any of it, or? I know what I'm hearing is confusing. I just wondered what your end of it is.
So we have a House bill sponsored by Representative Witt that I'll share with you, that it's fast tracking to get something in the queue to get some state funding. And we've listed all of our projects, and the beauty of updating our water plan and master plan or sewer master plans is there's the right projects, right, ready to go. They're defensible. There's all that work is, for a decade, 10, 15 years in some plants and without updating them. Transportation is one that needs to be updated, and it's way outdated, and we've made amendments to it, but not. So again, that's kind of the good work we're doing behind the scenes to queue up for these opportunities. There's also a request we just submitted to Business Oregon. I submitted yesterday listing our priority projects, storm and water infrastructure projects. There's 6 or 9 projects. But they're all multi-million-dollar projects and trying to get probably funded, probably not.
But if there's no money, you didn't have to make a worry about.
Well, if we don't try, we're not gonna get it.
Yeah, but now there's money, or possible money from Washington.
It's kind of interesting that Betsy also sits on the Ways and Means Committee and is somewhat dulling as those dollars out. Much as she's done in the past 4 years. So a pretty good position, I think.
Yeah, she's a tremendous asset to our region. So we're still continuing to talk with the Marine Board on the Great Cliffs Park and the beach nourishment, the DSL. That's turned into a fire drill over there to try to get that permitting with the material from the dredge sands to, if they're appropriate dredge sands, if it's the right depth. A lot of traffic back and forth on that. The industrial park, last meeting, the council approved, save one, the scope of work with McKenzie. We didn't have a personal services agreement with that, so you're going to see on tonight's agenda is, which looks like the same thing, but it's just the thing you've already approved with the personal services agreement stapled to the top of it. And that gets our insurance and our indemnity languages, all things like that. And attended the Main Street meeting last night. Energy's still, that mayor was there. Energy's good. They're looking, and they're going to propose soon an amendment to the memorandum of understanding where we had proposed to provide really for purposes of making it easier for them to have a staff person. We proposed for a half-time person, that would be a city employee. They feel like they can get a bigger bang for their buck, a more permanent person, better fit, and just create a little bit more divide if the city would just allocate those resources to them for that. I don't disagree if they feel like they've got the bandwidth and they had a whole real lengthy meeting on about
They did.
interviewing requirements. They had some professional people there that do that kind of thing. And there's some attorneys on the board and there's HR people on the board. So they feel like they got a good grasp on being able to have an employee. And it may not be a half-time person, but they maybe pay somebody a little bit more. And it's, our contribution isn't done 100% of the time. What, they have the ability to fundraise and to get grants and to build upon that partnership. So you will see something soon with that. So, and they're being really slow and deliberate on the hiring. They're not just taking them.
Yeah, sure. Actually, probably go there next week.
Yeah, we mentioned the attorney job description. Then we already talked about the tourism stuff. So, service clubs. I had a request from one of our employees, Rachel Berry, about what belonging to like the Rotary, the city being a Rotary membership. They have a personal membership, they have an organizational membership. The organizational membership usually has a person and a guest or something like that. And curious if the council would like to go there. We haven't done that in the past, but
That means we'd have a membership here, every one of the service.
Yeah, I know.
Potentially that those that wanted to be the city representative of that rather than their personal representative. There's a line there. And it is something to think about. It is like they are community partners. We'd like to have good relationships with them.
I absolutely agree with that part of it.
Did that for 5 years. At Rotary. Well, and now Kiwanis, but Rotary is a tough one because they have their meetings on Wednesday at noon. And Terry, our police chief was also there, and we had a hard time getting back to our 1 o'clock work session. A new meeting that lets out at 1, and there's usually goes over a bit. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the big caveat in that is that if it's the money trail, who pays the dues? The city or the person? So if we get assigned to Rotary, it's probably $150 a year. Does that come from the city or does that come from?
That's really the question. If we're sending our employees to be part of these groups, should we? That should be
Primary membership. Yeah.
Whether they just do it for them as a personal membership or whether they're a city business. And that's good community partner kinds of things. I don't have a strong opinion either way about it, but
Had a sticking point with that with the OJUA, that joint utilities use group that I belong to, and it was expensive. It was $400 or $500 a year to join that. So but that's it's worth it to me because I learned it was a great education for me.
That also opens the yacht club for you.
But what?
The yacht club, they're a community group.
Yacht club.
Yeah.
Great idea. Hey.
Rick's fishing group.
There we go. All fishing group club. Yeah.
I can learn a lot there.
I think it opens up a little bit of a over thought.
Here we
Where
go.
do you stop? Where do you stop that conversation? Just. Sideways.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. So I think that's.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead.
Matt, did you have
Budget committee.
budget committee? Yes. And we didn't finish.
Oh,
the-
yeah, so on the first, so budget committee on the first, and then urban renewal later, or urban renewal,
I should rephrase. I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
There's urban renewal and then there's city.
yes.
So
So the urban renewal started earlier than the city one. Is that what I heard you saying?
We're proposing that might provide some clarity in the roles and responsibilities of them.
I think that would be all right, as long as it's in that order.
Yeah.
because
The fiscal-
Traditionally used to our budget being in March and April.
the fiscal year doesn't change.
Right.
We're just having the meeting and the approval for the July budget in January versus bundling all the budget committee members together for multiple meetings and you gotta figure out which hat.
Well, yes, for just the urban renewal.
Just the urban renewal, yes. So the second part of that was, John mentioned about going for the urban renewal budget, moving to a biennial budget, which is every 2
I
years.
don't like that.
Yes.
I don't like that.
Why?
Because I think it needs to be something that needs to be, again, we didn't project. If you've got one of those houses over there at Greystone, on the tax rolls, you can see that they're almost all done. So the ones that they don't, they're all gonna be of pretty much the same value. I just don't agree. I think that with the urban renewal is a huge asset to us as far as moving forward as a council. And I think you need to be aware of what's going on, whether it's ebbing or flowing, and what's being built and projections within that urban renewal. I get the debt services on this, but that's only 1/3 of our urban renewal that we can use on this down here. The other 2/3 has to go out within the other parameters, correct? That's the way what more like presented it was 1/3 was down here, 1/3 was up the Columbia Boulevard roughly. It was cooked out like that.
So I would restate it as we need to meet our debt obligations.
Yes.
Whether, where the investments are. where
So-
they are.
So, yeah, again, projected. If the projections were right, we could leverage and they were way above.
The projections and the amount you receive
Or,
doesn't necessarily reflect the budget process.
that's right.
So the budget process, you would approve a budget for 2 years. You would still have to go back. Typically, what I see in other jurisdictions, when they switch their city budget to biannual, they do usually 2 times a year supplemental budget hearings. And so they update the budget from what you approved for what's gonna happen 2 years from now. They realize we're doing our best to project, but things change. So you do a supplemental budget to update those numbers. So you would still have that supplemental budget process. It's just first going through the process of approving the budget. And you could still have yearly urban renewal meetings. What I'm talking about is specifically the urban renewal budget committee. So you as an urban renewal agency could still meet once a month if you want. But the budget committee would only have to meet once every 2 years.
We only have to meet.
Correct.
Yeah,
They could meet more.
You could meet once a week if you were,
Right.
not that I'm suggesting.
And there's a point where we will have, it has money, it has lots of projects happening, we're gonna be meeting a lot more.
so October tax was not even, that was assessed in what, September?
So we get our bulk of taxes in November.
Yes.
So if I was to create a biannual budget for you as an urban renewal agency to approve in January, I could use the numbers from this November to project what we're gonna get over the next couple of years. And then 6 months or 12 months from now, I would just present to you a supplemental budget if there are changes.
Here's what I'm saying though, just follow me, okay, just real fast, because I know we have an executive session. Would be like, okay, so right now, we can see that Popeyes is getting ready to be built. If we don't visit that for 2 years, we have set what was current to and what we're collecting taxes off.
No, you're still gonna collect the same amount that you would.
No
even if-
matter, I know that,
Yeah.
we're getting that, the taxes, but
Yeah.
when it's not projected in the budget.
It doesn't matter, because we're gonna do a supplement. Let's say we approve a budget with 100 grand in revenue.
Cause we get
And we
100% of that Popeyes, we get 100% of that.
Correct. So let's say in January, you approve a budget for 100 grand of revenue. And then in November next year, we see, oh crap, we got 400 grand. Okay, we can actually do something.
Okay.
Then we produce a supplemental budget to adjust the revenue amount to have the ability to have the expenses.
I think having the council as the urban renewal council gives us that ability and flexibility to work and change and work through any kinds of conditions that arise.
Correct. And you as a urban renewal agency can adopt a supplemental budget without the budget committee.
So we'd like to
Right.
move forward with going to a January meeting for that budget. You have direction to start
Okay.
pushing that.
I'm sorry, but I have one more supplemental question. I'm sorry.
You're not sorry.
No, because doing a biannual budget changes the terms of a budget committee member. Whereas a city budget committee member has a term of 3 years. A urban renewal biannual budget committee is 4 years. So that creates a little contradiction for the same members that we have. Just like you are the urban renewal agency, the city's budget committee is also the urban renewal budget committee. So we right now hopefully have 5 applicants for the budget committee position that is open, including the existing person that is expiring. So there is a potential that we could have enough people to create a second budget committee separate. You'd have a budget committee for the city, which is 5 people, and you have an urban renewal budget committee, but they are separate people. The only reason I suggest that is because you've got one group with 3-year terms, one group with 4-year terms, and intermixing that is gonna be confusing for people.
Yeah.
If we can fill spots, would you be open to having 2 separate budget committee members?
Yes.
Well, the only downfall of that is if I was sitting on that urban renewal and in 2 years from now I get it, or maybe my email's even changed or whatever. You have no way of, or maybe I get an email, I'm like, what the heck? I don't even know what this is, right? And I just, nope, don't respond, nothing.
The nice thing is, I think with the urban renewal, you have a very specific set of people that are interested in that. And you have a very set of specific people that are interested in just the city. So I think there is some tailoring that you could do. And even though the budget committee for urban renewal would only meet every 2 years, it does not preclude them from attending other urban renewal meetings. If you have an agency meeting, budget committee can still
You okay with that?
come.
We got an executive session in at 6:15 meeting. Are you guys okay with that?
No.
At this point, I don't think we're okay. Anything else?
Yeah,
Nuh-uh.
one more thing, and it's city budget committee, as I mentioned, you have a position that is coming vacant at the end of December, it's Bill Eagle's position. He is interested in re-upping, however, we go through the process to elicit applications. We have 4 potential people in addition to Bill Eagle right now.
Who is it?
Bill Eagle. So a while ago, or last year or so, you changed the
We
process
did.
for the budget committee members to copy what other commissions do. So they go through an interview process, and we did that.
Yeah.
3 applicants, we set up a meeting and did Zoom and everything. Do you as a city council want to have another meeting for interviews for these 4 or 5 people? Or do you want to do it like the other commissions do, where they have maybe 1 or 2 council liaisons for the city, a couple people from the budget committee, and maybe 1 or 2 staff people do it, and then we bring you a recommendation for the budget committee? Or do you as a council want that final say and you want to interview all the candidates? Or do you want staff to do it?
Well, I think we went just through a review process, and then we did it on Zoom. And
Yeah, it was like a little 5-minute interview. We had 1 or 2
Well,
questions
so
for each
There
person.
was a little submission of
Yep.
the application itself that gave some information on it too. That seemed to work.
If you're okay with that, it's just
That works.
setting up another meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That works.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and, but we will be going into executive session under ORS 1926602E and H. So we're gonna go ahead and adjourn.